And so I'd like to start
No, that is good for you. If they give me honey, you know, they probably do have honey there.
multiplayer Hanukkah stream.
Yeah, you have to see what Bryce,
I think they just have a bottle 5 p.m. at the Egan Center. All families welcome.
Okay.
Tickets at the door or online at AlaskaJewishCampus.org. Happy Hanukkah to all.
When I grew up, I wanted to be a pro basketball player. An elementary school teacher. Oh, an Olympic gymnast.
No matter what dream you choose or where you are in life, your local Country Financial representative offers helpful advice on everything from auto and home insurance to financial planning, education to retirement, and business insurance too, so that you can continue to grow and dream. For more information, visit countryfinancial.com or call 1-866-COUNTRY. Country Financial. Grow your own way.
Why is A&A the Shop Alaska's independent Subaru specialist? How is it they've been voted the best shop in Anchorage not once but 6 times? Well, it's pretty simple. They offer the best warranty in the business. If they work on your Subaru, you're going to get a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty on both parts and labor. That's unheard of. A&A the Shop deals exclusively with Subarus, and they also offer $35 oil changes. All their technicians are ASE certified. Call A&A the Shop for an appointment. 562-3919 in Anchorage and 696-2096 in Eagle River.
Here's my good friend, Keith Montronock.
Automotive repairs can be frustrating. Let me help. Call 349-1637. I have been in business for nearly 20 years at the same location. Specialty Truck and Auto is in South Anchorage behind the Long Branch Saloon where Diamond becomes Abbott. I have 6 ASE certified technicians working from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. I have a voucher for any of the 6 Alaska Laser Wash locations for each customer. If you schedule ahead and need a ride when you drop your vehicle off, I may be able to help. Call Specialty Truck and Auto, 349-1637.
Are you ready? Dan Fagan and Glen Biegel are here. They're gonna tear it up, rip it down, and shoot it straight. Fagan and Biegel in the morning on Hot Talk, KOAN. And now, Fagan and Biegel.
Well, you know, I love numbers. You like numbers, Glenn?
Of course, we just talked about this yesterday.
That's true. We're talking about math. I guess math and numbers you really...
My wife really enjoyed that part of the education discussion, by the way. Probably because you were beating me in the debate.
Really?
I think so.
Your wife likes it when I win?
Well, I don't know. I that's just my theory. She didn't actually tell me, you know, because it was just sort of different discussion about education from a different angle.
That I don't think is necessary.
Yeah, you don't think math is necessary.
I caught that discussion yesterday, and I'll tell you that... to Dan's point, I mean, outside of calculating the discount at the mall or something, you don't. The average person doesn't bump into math, especially now that technology does it.
Yeah,
your phone does it for you.
Yeah,
you really don't even need a brain anymore. That's you got a phone.
But I think Glenn's point though was, and this is the biggest thing, is that you have a math background, so when somebody, let's say an
Glenn
average,
does.
yeah, well,
and Jason Klein's on the program here, by the way. We haven't
That's all right. People will
introduced anything.
I'll catch them on.
But no, so the point though is that if I was going to say 50% of respondents said that they 50% of the people who liked it said that they really liked it, and 13% of them, if I said something like that, you're at least understandable about math enough to be able to read that.
I think I understand percentages.
Yeah, and so if we don't give people math backgrounds, I think you run into problems.
I think that I can understand without being a mathematician that if 13% of people are for something and 87% are against, I think that's basically your basic fundamental adding and subtracting.
Yeah, but no, I mean I took up to calculus 2 in college, and I have I have not calculated one slope of a line tangent to a curve since I left. Not one. I
didn't even know that. You might as well speak Portuguese because I honestly don't know what any of that means.
Yeah.
Dan Fagan
I think
here.
it's more mental training.
Yeah.
That's
that point I'd stipulate.
And I totally and frankly I think that's what a lot of college is.
Yes.
A lot of college is simply mental training so that your mind is ready to operate in a way that it's not prepared to do when you leave high school.
In many ways, like physical training. If you don't use certain muscles, they lie dormant, they become weak. And same with your brain.
Yes.
They've got this new website that I've seen commercials about. I've never gone to it, called Luminosity.com.
I played with it for a while. I did a 30-day trial.
You did?
I mean, it's...
Did you meet any love of your life on there? I always figure all these sites have something to do with meeting someone. Am I wrong on that?
So Luminosity is simply, it's what they call brain training. I mean, and so here's the deal. I only did a 30-day training. It was fun, I guess, but... I don't know. I mean, what the problem is that while there are games, I still felt like I was learning, so I felt like...
I hate to learn.
I know that.
Nothing worse than learning.
Are you saying Angry Birds is not mental training?
Exactly.
Come on.
Yeah,
I have to calculate the trajectory, and I have to be angry with the birds.
I actually theorized that Angry Birds is about terrorism.
Oh.
So think about this. You have capitalist pigs, right, that have taken over your buildings, and you've got to blow up their buildings. And if you listen to the music, it's very Middle Eastern sounding.
Mm-hmm.
People are sitting at home saying, "Who are these people on my radio?" Dan Fagan here, Glen Biegel right over there. Jason Klein is our guest today. He's going to be co-hosting with us today. We appreciate him coming in.
Glad I could be here.
Jason Klein, of course. Most people who probably listen to the show have either heard of you or know something about you, but just for those who don't, who haven't, tell us a little bit about you, Jason.
Yeah, well, so I grew up here in Anchorage, left about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, but my start in politics and really my ability to get involved started a lot of listening to the both of you, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to guest host from time to time a number of years ago.
And you're a young man. How old are you?
28.
Okay.
Yeah, so
how'd you end up normal listening to us?
I know.
For
Yeah.
gosh
Well,
sakes.
and Glenn gave me a Saturday program when he was at a previous station. So I actually really fortunate to be able to sit with you two, who I was a big fan of.
You did it. Who did you do that with? Daniel?
Daniel, yeah, Daniel used to do it with me. He's now a press aide for the Senate majority.
I sent him a note yesterday. I wanted to get him on the show next week. He's a very, very intelligent fellow.
He is.
Yeah.
He, we met. I started College Republicans with another friend of mine here in Alaska, and he just wandered into a meeting. Jeremiah Campbell, who's his counterpart in the House, another College Republican recruit that now works in the legislature. So.
Press secretary.
Yeah, absolutely, for the House majority. So he does press secretary for Senate, and then Jeremiah does House. And so it's cool, seeing old college Republicans we help recruit and build, and now working in the political community.
I contacted Daniel yesterday. He said it's in D.C. for the
NCSL,
which is one of
the National Conference of State Legislatures.
Yeah.
It's kind of like ALEC and a lot of those where they talk about legislation and what's happening.
Well, I'm fascinated to talk to you today because you are. This is probably not a good descriptive term, but you're in the inner bowels of the conservative movement nationally.
Inner sanctum.
Inner sanctum bowels is not.
I don't actually think you want to be in the bowels of anything.
Right.
Or maybe a Navy ship.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, there we are. We're okay.
Yeah.
We're back with
you've worked. You like you just said, you spent some time with Dana Perino and other. You probably met Karl Rove.
Yeah, so I worked for a year for Americans for Prosperity, the Koch network.
Right.
And I
Koch brothers.
Yeah, the Koch brothers.
Who are, I believe, they're descendants of Hitler, right? According to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked for and actually, AFP has got a very small footprint here. So they're relatively new and things like that. But in Arkansas, where I was, we were bigger than the Republican Party.
Is that where they're headquartered from?
No. So what you've got though is that the vice president of the entire organization's from Arkansas. So she's helped fundraise and build the organization there. And she, honestly, as a quick little I guess pitch on what they did. I mean, in 2008, you had Mark Pryor, who just lost to Tom Cotton down there, run unopposed for the U.S. Senate. 5 or 6 year congressional delegation were Democrats. 100 members of the state house were Democrats. All of your constitutional officers. 2014, fast forward just 6 years, all 6 Republicans in the congressional delegation, 65 Republicans in the House of Representatives. You've got the state Senate, 25-10.
Wow. all
the 7 constitutional offices from governor down to Secretary of State, all elected Republicans. Huge, right? I mean, we're talking monumental transformation, and they played a large role in. Well, and I'll tell you is that 2008, you elected Barack Obama, who was a radical, and he proposed a government takeover of healthcare, and they spent years literally doing town halls.
Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah, they did. And so I walked in and took over the chapter starting 2013. It basically set up the 2014 election, and so as a sort of a very important state in their story about what they can do, it was I got to meet a lot of folks.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about today is this rift that apparently exists within the Republican Party between the Tea Party and the establishment, and if that's real, where do you come down on it? And I know we're going to take a break here in a minute, but when Glenn and I first started the show, I was just, it kind of angered me because it made people like Karl Rove and everything. I thought many of the Tea Party were blaming the country's problems instead of on Obama and Biegel. Carl Rove and John Boehner, and that just seemed misguided to me. So I started joking about how I'm an establishment guy, and of course I got a lot of wrath for that. But I'm curious how you see all that, and whether that's real or that's just an invention of the media. We'll talk to you about that. Car Moriarty's coming in today. Alaska Oil and Gas Association president. Of course, we'll take your phone calls, 569-1080, 569-1080. We're broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. We're also streaming live on danfagan.us. You can watch us on the internet there, listen to us. We'll be right back. 6:14 is the time. You can watch us on the internet there, listen to us. We'll be right back. 6:14.
Just sit there. Give them a call. 569-1080. Join the conversation. KOAN. After a hard day at work and then shopping for the holidays, the last thing you want to do is slave over a hot stove. Well, don't worry about it. Relief from this hectic time of year is just a jingle away. Call 333-8000 and ring in the holidays with the Sicily Season Greeting Special. 2 large 2-topping pizzas for only $11.99 each. So relax and let Sicily's deliver hot, fresh, delicious pizza, pasta, calzones, wings, and salads right to your door. It's fast, easy, and affordable. Call 333-8000 and ask for the Season's Greeting Special. 2 large 2-topping pizzas for only $11.99 each. For the only 24-hour-a-day delivery in Alaska, call 333-8000 or save 20% by ordering online at SicilysPizza.com. Best ingredients, best pizza, Sicily's. Wishing you and yours a safe and happy holiday season.
Being a business owner isn't easy. There's managing people, customers, income, expenses, unexpected issues, growing your brand, and so much more. Ready to be more efficient in everything you do? Then listen to Getting Down to Business with David Weatherholt. Each week, David gives you the inside scoop on the latest business news and trends, along with tools for keeping your business on track. Getting Down to Business with David Weatherholt. Saturday from 8 to 10 a.m. on Hot Talk, KOAN 95.1 FM and 1080 a.m.
Hey, if you think all you need to know about beer is how to pop the top off the can, go to worldclassbeer.com. There's a whole world of beer out there, and worldclassbeer.com can help you navigate it. Learn the difference between an ale and a lager at Beer U. Get descriptions of all the craft beers and learn why they're so different. And when you see one you'd like to try, the Beer Spy Locator can direct you to the closest store. Worldclassbeer.com, designed to help you get closer to your beer. Brought to you by the Odom Corporation. Always drink responsibly.
You're on with Fagan and Biegel in the morning. Give them a call, 569-1080. Fagan and Biegel, weekday mornings from 6 to 9 a.m. on the Talk of the Valley, KVNT.
6:17 in the morning. Look at that. I just remembered why I got into the math thing and the numbers thing.
Why?
Because it's the 10th of December, and it's the first double-digit day of December.
Whoa.
Which you know what double digit means?
Yeah.
Yeah. It means we're getting closer to Christmas. And that was the whole point that I was going to start the show with, but you robbed me of my
Double digit was supposed to be the number of points by which Biegel was supposed to lose his seat.
which I owe you a steak dinner for.
As I recall.
What did he end up losing by here? I couldn't.
2.5, maybe.
Wow.
Oh,
Whoa, yeah, 2.3.
So in Arkansas, where I was at, Tom Cotton had a similar. Mark Pryor was the Democrat incumbent. Tom Cotton won 57-38.
Wow. Now that's the kind of victory.
Yeah.
He got a bigger win margin than Lindsey Graham, who didn't even really have an opponent.
Oh, my goodness. Dan Fagan here, Glen Biegel. Jason Klein is our guest today. He's co-hosting with us, our guest co-host. And we're broadcasting on KOAN, KBNT, also streaming live, audio and video on danfagan.us. Our number, 569-1080. This riff in the Republic, or the conservative movement, I'll call it, that
The non-left movement.
Non-left. People who consider themselves non-leftists.
Well,
right?
creators of wealth,
the business, whether there's several factions. You've got, the Chamber of Commerce crowd, the business community. You've got the pro-life folks, who that's their main issue. You've got Tea Party folks, who it's really about taxes and smaller government. You've got the Ron Paul folks. It's about the Fed, and let's cut out the Department of Education and all these big departments. You got all kinds of mix. It's a hodgepodge. It's a big gumbo.
I put libertarians in there as well.
Libertarians, absolutely.
Common sense independence I add in there.
Yeah, so I always think it breaks out for the Republican Party on 3 issues, right? You have your sort of defense-minded, big spending Republicans, your Chamber of Commerce, and then your socially conservative people.
Oh,
right?
so you distinguish like when you say big spending, defense-minded, I think of people like Dick Cheney, and guys like this, and then the Chamber of Commerce people would be. Give me a politician who would be lined up with the Chamber of Commerce.
He's just been elected. Tom Tillis, though, in North Carolina, somebody like that, or
Dan Sullivan, our guy.
I think Dan Sullivan's very much like that. I think he's probably halfway in between somebody like Tom Tillis and Ted Cruz, maybe.
Gotcha.
So where does somebody who is against immigration fall, by the way, and where does Landfield fall in?
Jeff
Landfield,
yeah. So he's a libertarian. He's actually pretty representative of a lot of libertarian thinking,
Agreed.
right? So they're actually pretty pro. I don't think that they're pro executive actions to get things done.
Are we talking about Jeff Landfield in the same breath as Dan Sullivan and Karl Rove and Ted Cruz?
Let's take it a step above. Let's talk Rand Paul, right? Who's sort of a libertarian branded Republican.
Okay.
So I believe number one, there has to be respect for rule of law, right? But in the same breath, they're also pretty pro free trade, which also includes human capital. So I think that they would like to see more lax immigration policies. There's a number of common sense stuff we should have already done. Like, why would we bring foreign kids here to get PhDs and master's degrees and then not let them stay, let them take their degree out after we just partially funded their degree through tax money in public universities, right? So there's some little stuff like that, but I think that the libertarian-era Republicans would like to see more open borders, and here's my retort for them. And I always say this. I say I agree we need to have sort of taller walls for wider gates if we can, control the influx of illegal immigration, have a stronger immigration process, but you cannot have an open immigration policy and a welfare state at the same time.
Yes.
Very simple.
Not sustainable.
No, not at all.
Right.
So you asked the question, though, where do people fall between the sort of business Republicans and the Tea Party Republicans, right? I think that it was, in some ways, a mutually beneficial, mutually antagonistic relationship that was kind of just off to the side until the government shut down. That's when everything elevated, because business-minded Republicans saw that situation handled, in their view, so terribly and so badly that they could no longer allow sort of the Tea Party Republicans to have the keys to the House.
Because they hurt us politically.
Yeah.
Now Rush Limbaugh has come out recently and said that the government shutdown was not that big of a political liability. He cites the fact that we just swept the recent election cycle, 10 months after the shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Luckily, it was a year out, right? It was almost dead way between election cycles. So we did recover. And the problem is that you and I both know this, and I think that we're finally getting to a place where conservatives understand how to share information and share media, and we're not just retreating to ourselves. It was really kind of like a government slowdown.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was no shutdown.
85% of the government's still operating, right?
Yeah, but the media told the American people it was a shutdown.
But I think this is where the people started stepping away from the media and started believing Republicans more. That, if this is what a government shutdown looks like, where you're going to shut down the parks, which don't even cost anything, and throw people out of them, that's more on you, not really on the Republicans.
Well, Dave Letterman, who's clearly a guy left of center, I heard him say the other night, he was talking about, we may shut the government down again. He said, didn't they shut it down last time? I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So that's Letterman.
And that was with an administration who actively told people to make it hurt, make the cuts hurt. Right. You had a bureaucrat for one of the, I think it was Parks Department, something in North Carolina, who wrote an email saying, hey, I can actually absorb, the amount of money you guys aren't going to spend. Right. I can spread those cuts out just fine if you want. Right. And they said, no, you are to make this hurt.
You are to shut down for sure.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing of keeping the World War II veterans out of the
World War II memorial. Yeah.
It costs more money to keep them out.
Yeah. It's the same trick Harold Cuomo used to play with hockey.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to shut down hockey if you don't give me more cash.
Yeah,
and it's a brilliant strategy.
It is. But to Glen's point, we've got alternative media now. We've got talk radio, we've got blogs and podcasts and websites devoted to, and I think we're getting there. We're finally catching up to the sort of collectivist, sharing that the left is enjoying.
It's not a monopoly anymore. And I do take heart in that. Like, John Stewart did a little rant the other day about all these people who had been killed by cops, and of course a couple of them were not true, and he got called on it. Before, nobody would, he actually apologized.
Yeah.
That would have never happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. But there's so much conservative media out there that I think we got a fair shot now.
Let me ask you, I really am desperate to find out the answer to this question as to whether or not this is good political strategy. Because, frankly, you're the best political strategist most of us will ever run into.
Dan Fagan here, Glen Biegel, and Jason Klein, our guest today.
And my question is this. I thought the government shutdown, slowdown was pretty well executed, and that it stopped at the right time, that it started for the right reasons. It started for Obamacare. It started because we didn't like being shoved around by the president, and the expenditures are constitutionally required to come out of the House. So I liked all of that. What I didn't like was the uncertainty and not really having a plan. Okay, well, now what do we do? Since he did what we knew he was going to do. We knew what the president was going to do, right? We knew what the media was going to do. We knew what every other person was going to do. We didn't know what we were going to do.
Yeah, and I'll even take you a step further. We've got a real life example happening right now. Take a look at the immigration executive action. The president, we talked about it all year. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So at the event that it happens, we have spent the last month amongst ourselves talking about what we're going to do. Do we have a solution, X, Y, and Z? And the president has had an unmitigated month to go out and parade people. Look at these people I'm helping. Look what I'm doing. An entire month, right? So I would say the government shutdown, as far as a strategy, would have been fine if we had a strategy.
Well, here's my
thinking tactics.
Here's my suggestion. This is my suggestion for a strategy for them. We know what the president's going to do. He's going to stop Social Security checks at some point. We say, well, look, we don't like Obamacare. We don't like the executive actions of this president. We don't like the way that the Democrats have run this country for the last 6 years, and we want to stop that, and we believe that the people are on our side. We are going to stop this president in every way we can. And that will include preventing him from spending money that we do not want to appropriate, right? Appropriating money against our will. We don't want to do that. That might result in a government shutdown. We will let the public know, though, that we believe this is a radical president we're dealing with, and that we think he's going to stop sending out Social Security checks. We just want you to know that will not happen under our watch. So if they prevent us from passing bills which allow your Social Security checks to go out, we're going to lose this fight. And here's what I want. And here's what we need as Republicans. We need your vote next time. We need a better president who's not a radical, who doesn't like Obamacare just as you don't like Obamacare because you see the damage that it's doing, who wants these things handled in a legislative process and not some kind of force. So that's my suggestion, is just telegraph the fact that, yeah, we probably will get to a government shutdown because we don't like Obamacare so much, but we're going to give in because we believe we're up against a radical who you people elected. Give us a better president.
Yeah, well, and the biggest problem that you're going to run into is that you've got folks on the right, and we talk about the Chamber of Commerce type business type Republicans who think it's bad strategy or disagree with that. And so before we can present a unified front saying this is what we're going to do, we have to infight amongst ourselves, and we can't seem to get past that.
Have you ever heard the strategy, though?
But I haven't. Well, as far as that, I mean,
don't you think if conservatives, Ted Cruz stood up and said, hey, this is what I want to do?
So the problem is Ted Cruz has really bruised himself, right, among his colleagues. And so here's what I would say. So take Arkansas, for example. The insurance exchange that was supposed to be set up in Obamacare in 2011, we successfully pulled that piece out of the DHS budget, which is our Department of Health Services, and refused to pass the budget until that piece was not in there. Literally held up the budget, and we didn't have a shutdown situation. It would have gotten there, but we would have gotten it, and it worked.
Let me stick in a quick call here, 569-1080. Jim, you're on with Dan Fagan, Jason Klein, Glen Biegel. Hello, Jim.
Yeah, I wanted to ask your guest, does he think Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution might come into play to help us get a little more constitutionally centered in our country?
Yeah.
Going around. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So
Article 5 is?
Article 5 is your Convention of States program, so there's a number of ways you can, adopt new, a new amendment to the Constitution. A lot of people don't want a constitutional convention, so an Article 5 convention is a different process.
Just made up of the states.
Right, so it's a convention of the states, right? And so this is actually gaining some steam down in the lower 48.
This is Mark Levin's idea, right?
Yeah, and so it's actually being carried by a guy at the Goldwater Institute, and his name escapes me right now, but he's been gathering legislators in various states, and they're signing on to this Convention of States program. Here's my biggest problem with changes to the Constitution. I would love to add things like balance, but I mean, we got a Constitution now we don't follow. So having more Constitution to follow
As long as you get activist judges and lawless presidents.
And that's really what it comes down. I mean, take a look at all of the same-sex marriage stuff. Regardless of whether you fall on the issue, judicial activism is what's bringing it to us.
100% of it.
So until we follow the existing Constitution, which I think provides a number of things, protections for states' rights, things like that, changes aren't going to do much.
Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel. Our guest today is Jason Klein. We have Kara Moriarty coming up. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. The time currently 6:29. 569-1080. The time currently 6:29.
Give him a call, 569-1080, KOAN.
With KOAN News, I'm Chuck White. A man who showed up at Matsu Regional Medical Center seeking treatment for gunshot injuries on December 1st has now died of his injuries. Police say 24-year-old Forrest Bieber of Anchorage was one of two men who appeared at the hospital at the same time with gunshot injuries. The other man survived. They reportedly came to the hospital shortly after two incidents of home invasions in Wasilla. Although they have not been linked to those cases, police are still trying to sort out what happened. Disabled Alaskans will get a chance to try sled hockey. That story from Ann Kenda.
Challenge Alaska has purchased 12 new sleds that paralyzed individuals can use either with or without assistance to play hockey. The sled has a bucket seat that sits on blades, and the player will use shortened hockey sticks to push a puck around. The sleds will be available at Matsu's 4 indoor ice arenas by mid-January.
That's your Hot Talk News update. Local weather is next.
For today, we'll have a blend of sun and clouds with a high of 30. Patchy clouds tonight, low 19. Then tomorrow, partly sunny skies with a high 23 and a low tomorrow night of 14. Some sun to start the day Friday, then we'll turn cloudy, high 25. Mostly cloudy Saturday, high 26. And cloudy Sunday, high 33. Hot Talk, breaking news, and the latest weather. KOAN 95.1 FM and 1080 AM.
December 13th, 2014 is a very special day for a number of reasons. It's the last consecutive date that we will experience in our lifetimes. Well, 1314. And it's very special because Mid Country Liquor is having a customer appreciation all because of you. To honor you and this very special day, we will individually give away 12 bottles of Crown Royal, 13 bottles of premium wine, and 14 cases of beer. Just enter to win. We will draw for these prizes on December 13th and make many of our loyal customers very happy winners. Shop and enter to win at any or all of our locally owned and operated tax-free locations. Mile 49 Parks Highway, Mile 4.5 Connect Bay Road, Palmer Wasilla Highway at Four Corners, and Cubby's Market, Mile 98.5 Parks Highway. We think you're pretty special every day, not just 12, 13, 14. No particular purchase necessary.
Keeping the valley in good spirits, yeah. Connect Country Liquor, oh yeah. KKL.
You know what was the #1 gift Alaskans sent to their relatives for Christmas last year? Well, if you said Alaska King Crab, you're right on. Last year, New Sagaya sent over 20,000 pounds of king crab to Alaskan friends and relatives outside. That's more than 10 tons. New Sagaya makes it so easy. For just $159, New Sagaya sends 5 pounds of extra-large golden king crab legs anywhere in the continental United States. And that includes UPS next-day air delivery. And New Sagaya does it right for you. The big crab legs and claws all boxed into styrofoam box with dry ice and gel ice. It's guaranteed to arrive in perfect condition. But you'll want to avoid the rush as much as you can, so call right now. New Sagaya will program your delivery for whatever day you specify. Just call 1-800-764-1001. The King Crab Festival for just $159. From New Sagaya, 1-800-764-1001. Or order on the web from newsagaya.com.
Napa know-how! Napa tire gauges are now just $1.99. The perfect gift for anyone who owns a car with tires. But when giving the gift of $1.99 tire gauge, don't put it in one of those long jewelry boxes with a giant red bow and your wife's name on it. Because while a $1.99 tire gauge from Napa can be useful, it can't keep you warm at night. Conquer the job with Napa know-how. at participating Napa Auto Parts stores while supplies last. Offer expires 12/31/14.
Local news, weather, and the Dan Fagan Glen Biegel Show on Hot Talk. KOAN. Brought to you by Connect Country Liquor with 4 convenient.
That's 345-5555. Hot Talk KOAN, man. You're on with Fagan.
Happy Hanukkah to all.
Fagan, Biegel. Weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. The Talk of the Valley. KVNT.
6:36 in the morning. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel. Right here on KOAN, KVNT. We're also streaming on danfagan.us, video and audio. Our number 569-1080. Our guest co-host today is Jason Klein, political consultant. Worked on many campaigns nationally and of course here in Alaska. You born and raised here? You just
Well, I was born in Seattle, but I came here when I was about 6 months old. So I basically, born and raised, basically.
Born and raised almost like Sarah Palin.
I've got a social security number from here.
Yeah, good for you. I still want to explore this Karl Rove versus Ted Cruz rift.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said that there's a lot of Republicans who turned against Ted Cruz.
Yeah. In the U.S. Senate right now, that's a big thing. He's sort of been bruised just because So when Marco Rubio was elected to the Senate, everybody expected more out of him. But I'll tell you, he's a workhorse, not a show horse.
Right.
Ted Cruz went the other way.
Yeah.
So, and I think that a lot of times they kind of look at him and kind of roll their eyes and stuff.
Because is it because he's always in front of the cameras and so Rubio's kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, and he's a learner and he's a worker, and Rubio does do. I think so. So you used to do TV, this, and the joke at the Capitol in Arkansas is that the most dangerous place at the Capitol is between a camera and a politician.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
They used to say that about Ethan Berkowitz here.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think that Rubio, I think that all of them would appreciate the attention, and they look at Ted Cruz. There's probably some jealousy built in because the guy's number one. He's a fantastic speaker. I don't know if you've gotten an opportunity to see him speak.
I think you did, didn't you, Glenn?
Yeah, actually, I hosted an event that he was at, Dan Sullivan's event out
in the Valley. Yeah. So and
great.
if you give him a big enough stage, you watch. He's very skilled orator, right? Like he's going to hit his points on the stage. He's going to,
But what is it that the senators
stuff.
don't like? And do they not like the fact that the people like him, which is my total guess?
Yeah, he's got a very tight following. I think the problem is that. You take the government shutdown. Go back to that one again. That was sort of his brainchild. He and Jim DeMint cooked that up together, and I think that
Jim DeMint now with the Heritage Foundation.
Correct. Yeah.
The former senator.
And I'll tell you that the South Carolina. I worked a cycle in South Carolina, and you won't find a state with a better bench of conservatives than South Carolina.
Is that because DeMint?
I think it largely is. I mean, the problem is you got state politics is sort of a mess there. It's a little bit more. Establishment, I guess, if you would say. What you got is a bunch of old, Democrats who during the Reagan era flipped to Republicans and didn't move their political ideology much, but their political, party they did.
And they kind of put McCain over the top
Yeah, in 2000, yeah. Originally, he won South Carolina. Yeah, so but you've got, I mean, you take a look at their congressmen: Trey Gowdy, Mick Mulvaney. You know, you got Tim Scott in the U.S. Senate.
Gowdy's fun to watch.
He is. You know, and I actually think that if he can stay at it, I mean, Attorney General. You know, get him on there.
Now I heard somebody, I don't remember who it was. I think it was maybe Ann Coulter, saying there's really only 4 presidential candidates. She said it's got to be a governor.
Yeah.
And she said I'm trying to think who she said. I think Jeb Bush, Chris Christie. Walker, and there was one other one.
The one from Ohio.
No, I don't think it was Kasich.
No, you don't think it was Kasich. The guy from New Jersey.
Christie, we said
no,
Christie.
It was Texas.
Rick Perry.
Rick Perry. So Perry.
There's 3 reasons you should support Rick Perry, and I can't remember the third one right now.
Rick Perry, Chris Christie, Walker, and then who was the one that we?
Christie, Perry.
Jindal?
Christie. No, so you got Christie, Perry, Walker,
and Jeb Bush.
Bush, yeah.
And she said those are the 4 contenders. She said, you know, Ann Coulter's a real matter of fact. I had her on my own show once. She said, look, get used to it. Those are your choices. Stop playing around. Pick one, and let's move on. Because she doesn't think a senator, and I kind of agree with that. You know, I don't know. I don't know this.
Well, someone on the left, just to give everybody shorthand here, and Jason Klein is in studio, Fagan, Biegel, Klein's in with us. Just to give everybody shorthand, everybody on the left agrees essentially on every point. There are very few dissenters in very few issues, and most of those are just local. Like, we want our water facility to work this way, or Mark Begich might come out and say publicly, well, gee, I'd really like Anwar open, and then not do a doggone thing in order to make it happen.
Or behind the scenes fight.
So anybody on the left is gonna work as long as they've got the team behind them, and the team is made up of essentially the Clinton machine.
Yeah.
Right?
You
569-1080, by the way.
You said this a long time ago, you know, and I'll tell you a story that illustrates it, but you said the agreement on the left is probably above 90, and on the right, you know, it's probably sub 50. That's being very generous to us, too. But there's a guy, his name is Jeff Wardlaw. He's a legislator down in Arkansas, and he's a Democrat rural Democrat, which means he's conservative. He's probably, he is to the right of Mike Hawker, I'll tell you that. But anyway, so he told me one time, he said, you know, I would probably switch to being a Republican, but here's the problem with you guys. He said y'all because he's from, you know, southern Arkansas.
All right.
He said, here's the problem with y'all. He says, you know, we go in a back room and we beat each other up, but we come out holding hands.
That's right.
He says, y'all air your dirty laundry in public.
Yeah.
And so that's what it comes down to, is there may be disagreement, but they're wise enough to walk hand in hand.
Oh, they're doing that right now, by the way, for the mayoral election right here in Anchorage.
Yep.
Yeah. There are 3 people who are on the assembly, all of whom want to run, and they've all mutually agreed. Let's do a poll, figure out who's the strongest candidate. That's the person who'll go. Oh, wait a minute. Mark Begich might run for mayor. Yeah. Put all of us on hold. Yeah. Let's find out what he's going to do. And then
those 3 candidates are Elby Gray Jackson,
Trainee,
and Hahnemann.
Okay.
They've decided, we've been told by a very good source, that they've decided collectively whoever polls the best, if Begich doesn't run, we'll let the person who polled the best.
So I think there's wisdom in it.
Yeah.
Take a look at Dan Sullivan. When he was elected in 2009, there were 16 other people, and they were fighting amongst, you know, scraps because he was the one guy we coalesced around.
But here's why that works. It works because Elby Gray Jackson, Paul Hahnemann, Pat Flynn, and Dick Cheney, and Mark Begich, and Barack Obama, and Harry Reid, and Nancy Pelosi don't disagree on one single thing. I beg you. I am telling you right now, media, and I've read this like I don't know how many times, 100 times, every single article Pat Flynn has mentioned it. Moderate Pat Flynn.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like for you to tell me, to back up your point, because I know you have the data here at Alaska Dispatch News. I know you have it. You're just not telling us what it is. But I know, I don't believe you have it. Tell us what he disagrees with Elby Gray Jackson on. Tell us. Yeah. There isn't a thing.
Yeah.
I would bet that they vote the same. I always like to go back. I was joking with somebody the other day. Who came up with Socialist 6? Was that, remember when the assembly, that was you, right?
I think so.
I still think it's, you know, that was, in my opinion, one of my, I think so.
Yeah.
I know Eddie Burke used to say it. I remember Eddie used to say it, but I remember, I swear you come up with it, you know, because you had like the Fiscal 5 and the Socialist 6 and stuff. But I remember going back to that thinking it no better encapsulates what those people are. They are an agreement on all of those things, but that's the thing. I would agree with you. What's the difference between a Pat Flynn and an Elby Gray? What's the difference between a Nancy Pelosi?
The difference is how they look in front of the camera.
Yeah.
That's it. The difference is how they deliver a speech, not what it is that they're going to do. You know, and there may be Walker, by the way, to me is different here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
that's the that's why
he's
so
so
fortunate to have Jason Klein because he's such a great political mind. I am dying to ask him about the Unity ticket.
Okay.
His thoughts. So Jason Klein, that's coming up next. We'll take some phone calls too. 569-1080, 569-1080. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel here. Jason Klein is our guest co-host today, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT, streaming danfagan.us. Time currently 6:44. danfagan.us. Time currently 6:44.
And seniors don't know how to ski or want to become.
Fagan and Biegel on Hot Talk KOAN and on
years. Always live responsibly.
You're on with Fagan and Biegel in the morning on the Talk of the Valley, KVNT 92.5 FM, 1020 AM.
Well, here we are on the 10th day of December. It's the first double-digit day of the year. Glenn, that means there's 2 digits in the date.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we're only 25 or 15 days. See, there's my math deficiency. I almost said 25 days from Christmas. 15 days away from Christmas.
All right.
We're Dan Fagan here, Glen Biegel, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. Streaming danfagan.us. Jason Klein's our guest. He is a political consultant of renown. He's worked on the Koch brothers network on a number of different states. He knows his stuff. He's almost born and raised in Alaska, though, so he also knows Alaska politics as well as anybody. He's a young man, only 28, but he is much wiser than his years. I'm curious, have you ever seen anything like the Unity ticket here in Alaska in your years of watching politics?
No, not successfully, to tell you the truth. You know, I mean, what you've got is a guy who took a Republican primary run a couple years ago. I thought he
Bill
ran.
Walker.
Yeah, he ran a very successful campaign for what
Did
it was.
much better than most people thought.
Yeah, I mean, he got 36% of the vote in the primary, which nobody expected out of him.
Against Parnell.
Right, against Parnell, who he would eventually beat later in a general election. But, and I thought he ran a clean race, stayed involved for the 4 years after, did exactly what he needed to. And I'll tell you that, take for example, one of my very good friends, Wings and Things, right? So Carrie Whitney, you remember Carrie?
Oh, yeah.
So her husband.
Does she still own Wings and Things?
No, so her brother was the owner. She was the manager. She was, Glen would know her. She's Catholic, and they probably go to Holy,
Well,
her
she
kids
just
go to Holy
invited me to
Rosary.
we were at dinner just on Friday.
Right.
Well, they were big in the pro-life movement.
Big time,
Yeah.
yeah. So Carrie, who's a good friend of mine, her husband's a union rep, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the prospect of a Walker ticket for her was really exciting. Pro-labor, pro-life. I mean, that was something to her, which I would bet take a number of union members across Alaska, which is a very heavy union state, and the prospect of like a conservative union guy, it's appealing. There wasn't enough of them in a Republican primary, but in a general, it makes an impact.
Yeah.
So you've got, sort of a Don Young approach, I think, which has been obviously proven successful, and Byron Malott, which I think appeased the left enough to, sort of, like we talked about, I mean, they swallowed their pride, and it's the same thing that when the left joined with Lisa Murkowski, which was in a way a unity ticket of herself.
Yes.
And so it was a collection of women, leftists, and moderates.
Business community, native corporations.
Yeah, I mean, GCI put money into that
Absolutely.
super PAC, and so, and that's what you've got, is that I think that Alaskans, fiercely independent, and they like that. I mean, and I think it's a unique. I still, in all my travels, I tell people, Alaska has the most unique political climate you will ever operate in.
So was Lisa Murkowski, though, the first example of the unity ticket?
I think she is. I think she is, because, I mean, if you remember, I went to, and I'll tell you a story. I was at the Young Republican, the first one after she announced, and we all sat around, and they were like, well, can we endorse Lisa, blah, 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 and I said, I'm going to ask you all a question. I went to her big announcement of her writing campaign. On that stage were Native leaders, union leaders, and various basically like leftists and stuff. 4 years from now, what's going to be different about Mark Begich's announcement? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the constituency he sewed together: military, military background,
right,
Native leaders, and unions. Right. So I said, that's what she did. I mean, I think that she was the first person who recognized sewing together various constituencies. I mean, take the Walker Malott. I mean, the Pot constituency, the Native union. I mean, they pulled everybody.
There is a group of conservatives. Eddie Burke would be one of the more outspoken ones, who identify with that. And of course, I don't think Burke supported Murkowski, but I know Eddie's a big Walker fan, and it's like Bob Lester. I don't think Bob Lester's a liberal, Bob and Mark, but he's big union guy, and I think there's just a group of Alaskans like the person you just described. If you're pro-union and pro-life,
Walker's your guy.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, and he kind of, and I think he successfully cast himself sort of as like another Wally Hickel.
Yes.
That's what he wanted. I mean, that was the legacy he looked for.
Yeah, that's his mentor.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, let's get down and dirty here. What percentage? This is a question that's been on my mind, and you probably know it better than I do. What percentage of politics is showboating, and what percentage of politics is simply dictated by this is how much money we have to spend? We don't have a lot of options. We can't really change all that much. So, I mean, how much Kenton Walker actually act differently than Sean Parnell?
How's he going to walk tightrope?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? So, like, aesthetically, and to the showboating part, there's little showboating to do when you've only got this money. Bruce Rauner was just elected in Illinois. Speaking to the Farm Bureau yesterday, he said, look, you guys are not going to like me for the first couple of years, but 4 years from now, you'll look back and appreciate what I did. Yeah. And I hope that he's got the
That's
gumption.
vision, by the way. And for somebody who does not recognize it, because we may have never heard that kind of talk here in the state of Alaska, that is the definition of a man with vision.
Yeah.
In other words, we can't keep doing business the way we've been doing it, so we're going to change the way we've been doing it, and then it's going to be better for us, and you guys will see that 4 years from now. Get ready for some pain.
And didn't Chris Christie employ some of that similar rhetoric?
Yeah, I was just going to give an example. I mean, he used showboating to sell reality, right? He said, I'm not the federal government. I can't print more money.
Right.
I have this much, and this is what we're going to spend.
Christie now.
Chris Christie.
And I also vividly remember Christie, right when he became governor in a very liberal state, saying, hey, I got one term to fix things.
Yeah.
If I don't get reelected, that's fine with me, but I'm going to give it my best this first term.
And what, do you get 70% of the vote the next time?
Exactly. But, I mean, he laid the gauntlet down and said, hey, you may not like it, but I got one term to get things done. That's so unusual to hear.
It is. And, and the question is that is Walker, see, I've heard Walker speak, and he's not a Chris Christie type orator at all, right? I mean, somebody said this, and I wasn't listening to the debate, but they said, it's almost like he had cotton balls in his mouth or something, when he was talking. I don't know. I don't like to take personal jabs at the guy, but he's not the orator that Chris Christie is. And so the question is how much showboating can be accomplished when you've only got so much money? I mean, the savings account's been dwindled. We're looking at terribly low oil prices for the foreseeable future. There can only be so much showboating, right? I mean, and normally most of politics, the theater of politics, is about it. But at some point, you've just got to drill down and do the work.
Can I ask you a question? This is
talking to Jason Klein, who's a political consultant.
This is a hard question
1080.
about Sean Parnell, and what I saw him do in his administration was what an average person would do,
mm-hmm.
and that was, hey, we've got a lot of money. I guess I'll spend some of it. I guess I'll spend a lot of it.
Yeah.
I'll spend more of it than anyone's ever spent before in the state of Alaska.
Ever.
Knowing, I guess they didn't know. This is what their answer would be, is they didn't know. Is he just an average person, and the conservatives are looking for somebody more than average?
See, I agree. I think that Sean Parnell, was in a situation where he probably got some really, really cool advice about, if you build out the capital budget, you'll get support from contractors, and that in turn will, we'll look at a re-election campaign. But the problem is that we don't elect normal people. We don't want to. But I'll tell you, I also think that Sean Parnell, a brilliant legislator. Everybody always said that his fingers were on everything when he was at the state capitol. He's just not he's just not an effective executive.
I called him the Lion of the Senate, and I remember him standing up and basically standing up to Tony Knowles every single year, and he had a lot of support. There were a lot of people who were good leaders way back then, but he was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I think that you take somebody like Mike Dunleavy, who I think can be that. He's a little bit more of the silent Cal approach. I think he's a very thoughtful, quiet guy. But I think a conservative who could probably unite in the event that I think Walker doesn't take the fiscal issue seriously, because it needs to be.
Can we do over under for each of us on how much we think he's going to actually cut, really, for real, out of the budget?
Yeah, well, so you gave a figure earlier.
$500 million is what I think he'll do, which is 1/6 of the current deficit.
Right. So let's say he what size budget is he proposing? Because we're going.
Well, and he may zero out the capital budget. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about operating budget. Which
overall, this should be the overall.
Yeah, let's throw a number.
Okay.
Capital
capital was $700 million. He probably locked into about 350 of that. So I'd say he's going to go $850 million.
You think on cuts total?
Total cuts, 300. He'll go about 300 to 350 from capital, because he's locked in for school building and that kind of stuff, and $500 million from the operating.
So is this like Price is Right, like closest without going over? Because I'm gonna go $8.50 and 1 penny.
Oh man, I hate that guy.
But no, I think he cuts. I think he cuts $1 billion up over $1 billion. I do think so.
Okay.
Just before I give my answer, if I could get a little history here. Last year, Parnell cut what, $1 billion or several hundred thousand?
No, it's like 1.1 billion or something.
Okay, the year before that he cut
about $1 billion.
And the year before that
maybe it was like $1 billion each year. So $1 billion, $1 billion, $1 billion.
For 3 years.
Yeah, but that includes both capital
and then when the Senate bipartisan coalition was in charge, he raised it how much?
Oh God, it went
more
from
than the
$8 billion, and it went up to 11.2 or 11.5 billion.
His overall record, beginning to end, was what?
I think he was handed something like an $8 billion budget, and it went down to 6.2.
So he did.
So
cut
I do
$2 billion.
think.
See, but the
I do
problem,
think,
so these are
but I'm not really sure.
these are like Washington cuts, though, right? Like, so if you spent, like, if I went to you, Dan, and I said, how much did you spend on coffee last week? And you said $100, and then, next week you spent 120, but you cut back to 119. You said, I cut $1.
Yeah, okay.
But you're still 19 plus.
All right. Well, I'm gonna get a commercial break to think about my answer. 8:50 or 6:58. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, Jason Klein's our guest. Stay with us. 8:50 or 6:58. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, Jason Klein's our guest. Stay with us.
Constitutional action on legal immigration. House Republican Joe Barton, if approved, Homeland Security
We're on with Fagan and Biegel in the morning. Give them a call, 569-1080. AOAN.
7:06 on a Monday morning. No. Yeah, it is Monday. No.
I don't even think you're close.
I have no idea.
You're not even in the right week.
Is it December or November?
Wednesday, December 10th.
December 10th.
Happy birthday, Mark.
2014, 2013. Whose birthday?
My buddy Mark.
Oh, okay. Happy birthday, Mark.
All right.
What's his last name?
Mark Griffin.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a DJ.
Where's he work?
At the Gaslight.
Oh.
I don't go there to watch him, but I know him.
So I've got budget numbers all the way back to 2000.
Let me introduce Glen Biegel here, Dan Fagan, Jason Klein, our guest, political consultant, nationally renowned. Thrilled to have him. The debate here is how much will Walker cut? Glenn said
$850. Well, actually, the debate is how much actual changes in politics. I mean, because a new governor comes in, people think the whole political landscape is magically going to be rewritten. It's my opinion that 80 to 90% and maybe higher of all politics is essentially, look, what do we have to spend? What can we do? We can't really change a whole lot of things. So, they don't have as much to spend. They're going to have to cut back. I don't think he's going to cut back as much as he should. I say $850. Jason says $1 billion plus.
Yeah. And we should say Parnell the last 3 years cut about $1 billion each year.
And probably mostly in capital, or you're going to tell us that.
Yeah, I think it's so here's what we've got. So Parnell walks in, his first budget that he owns 2011, right? Because Palin.
Can we just stay on operating? Because operating's really all I care about.
Okay.
The capital budget might go away altogether this year.
Okay, so I don't have it broken out, but I've got overall budget numbers, and your operating budget is like 90% of what you're doing. I mean, you're talking.
And just for those who don't know, the reason operating budgets are so, when I remember when I used to read the Daily News editorial page, they love cuts if it's capital, they hate cuts if it's operating. When you cut the operating budget, you're going into the face of unions, you're cutting into the welfare state. The left hates cuts to the operating budget. They are thrilled with cuts to the capital budget because that's roads, bridges, highways, sometimes a lot of pork, but basically you're spending for the future with the capital.
Our infrastructure. A lot of it's schools, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so you're completely correct. They love seeing operating budget increase because your Medicaid, your education, your welfare programs, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so taking budget numbers, so you got revenue against how much was spent. So 2011, you had $7.67 billion in revenue. They only spent $5.47. But you get up in years where you're spending $8 billion almost. 2013, $7.78 billion. These are pretty solid increases, and so you've got huge amounts of dollars going out, almost $8 billion. And I would bet with capital is where we got up to 11. So this is probably just operating. But the point being, you're operating at a $2 billion deficit for the 2014.
$2 billion.
Well,
could be three and a half.
It was $2 billion before oil prices crashed.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And so 1.9 was projected before, but now it's closer to 3.5. Right. So you're going to be looking at revenues of only, I guess we're probably looking at revenues of $3-4 billion probably.
Yeah.
For 2000.
And people should be thankful that we're under Senate Bill 21 here, by the way, because if we'd have been under ACES, we'd have gotten a lot less.
Yeah.
Now what about federal?
As far as federal dollars coming in. That's all part of it. I think that I don't know how much of the mix that is, but
I know that they just recently the Pew Charitable Trust just ranked states for federal spending per capita, and Alaska is $14,375 per person, is the third highest in the nation.
Yeah, a lot of that's military, by the way.
Yeah, that's
we
true.
have the largest percentage of military personnel in the state of Alaska
per capita.
Per capita.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean it's huge, right? So that's the problem, right? Like at number one, federal spending has to decrease at some point, but I don't think we're going to. I mean, I think that
Well, it's been going down here. We went from 10 billion to 5 billion here. So it's gone down
here's what I said to Glenn earlier, and I think that this is very true. Take Medicaid expansion, for example. The prospect of bringing more federal dollars in, and so here's a good story. So Scott Walker, his federal poverty level for Medicaid, they set your populations for Medicaid at a certain level of poverty, was already above what Obamacare asked for. So he was able to roll existing Medicaid people into Obamacare Medicaid, which saved his budget billions because the federal government picked up the tab, which allowed him the room to cut down to the level where state taxpayers didn't have to foot a huge bill, right? So I would I'm guaranteeing you Walker's going to be looking at as many ways he can shift costs in the same way, and I was lightly critical of Mayor Dan Sullivan because he did this at the city. He would shift projects, capital projects to the state that the city used to fund in order to shrink his budget. It doesn't reduce government spending in a philosophical sense, but for when he runs for something, he can say, and to Dan Sullivan's credit, he actually shrunk his budget. It wasn't just cuts, it was actually cutting government.
Right. Well, now, so let me ask a couple questions. So, right now, so the budget that was just submitted was what? Was the Parnell just submitted, or the Walker submitted that was Parnell's budget?
You said 2013 was 8 billion.
Yeah. So 2000. Let me pull those
and then
numbers.
2000, and we're actually in the 2015.
The one that was just submitted.
Okay. So the one that he's submitting, the 2015.
Okay.
The spending projection that I have on this, which is a little bit outdated, but 6.19 billion.
And that includes capital.
I believe it does.
Okay. But that's down from 8.
It is. It's down from a high of 8, which was 2013.
Right.
We did 7.2.
We don't know how much of that 6.1 is capital.
Correct.
Okay. So the operating budget, what can you cut? Because when we had Parnell in here, he made it sound like you're gonna have to put people out on the street to make any significant cuts.
It's just untrue. The problem is you got a number of contractors who, we all remember. Let's take the crime lab. Right, like the most egregious example of waste you will find, right?
And let me just, for folks who don't remember, I think the average crime lab, like in Phoenix or Los Angeles, was about 19, 20, 25 million to build. I mean, this is Los Angeles. City had 10 million. Our crime lab cost, well, I think it was going to eventually cost 120 million to fix or to complete.
Yeah, they put 91 million for starter.
The only other crime lab that came even close, I'm talking about even close to that expense, was the
federal
FBI crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, that handled the caseload for the entire nation. I mean, it was egregious. You're right. And the contractors who built it, they gave money to Parnell. I'm not saying that's why he stuck with it, but I'll forever always have that in the back of my mind. It was the worst case of government waste I've personally ever experienced in my life that I've ever seen. And Parnell refused to do anything about it, but so you were about to say. I just wanted to say
no, and so that's the problem is that, so I can't remember the guys, and he won a Nobel Prize for this, right? So the concept is this. It's very simple. The lobby to increase government spending will almost always win against the lobby to decrease because the benefits are concentrated and the costs are spread out.
Yes.
So it's even worse at the federal level, but you've got people who, I mean, if I could come to you, like, go back to these, how many times have we heard these bonds for schools, right? Yeah. They put 50 grand up, they get 50 million or something. I mean, if I'm a contractor and I can throw $5,000 in donations out and turn around and get a $90 million construction contract, that's an ROI that the average person will never see.
And another thing these contractors do is when there is a ballot initiative to sell bonds, they'll spend a ton of money advertising in favor of the bond.
Well, when we come back, I really do want to hear where could we cut, because there actually have been projects for here's where you can cut, and now I want to get down to some specifics for Alaska, and we'll lay out what the state does spend money on.
714.
We'll lay out what the state does spend money on.
714.
Join the conversation. KOAN.
and more. Business people helping business people take their skills and services.
What about you folks? Where would you go?
I'd bring my mother up to visit every single year.
And I'd go to Mexico.
Talk, KOAN, 95.1 FM and 1080 AM. Hot Talk, KOAN, man. You're on with Fagan and Biegel.
Always live responsibly.
Welcome back, Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, right here on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us. Our phone number, 569-1080, 569-1080.
Free re-roofing and new roof estimates, just a phone call away. Their name, Earhart Roofing, the only platinum preferred contractor in all of Alaska. Better Business Bureau's Business of the Year across all businesses in the entire state of Alaska. That was for 2010. It's an amazing accomplishment in the roofing business. It probably has never happened in any state. I mean, it's just an amazing accomplishment. These guys are great at what they do. Earhart Roofing, 42 years in the business, upwards of 60 employees, 17 trucks, no job they can't handle, and no phone call they don't want. Please include them in your bidding process. Almost always the lowest bid, but always the best choice. 345-5555. When you think roofing, think Earhart, E-A-R-H-A-R-T.
Our number, 569-1080, 569-1080, Fagan Biegel in the morning. We have Jason Klein, political consultant, political guru, well-respected not only here in Alaska but nationally. He's in the studio with us. We're talking about the Walker administration, and they are, as we used to say down south, in a pickle. They don't have a lot of money. They've got labor union breathing. Mr. Walker has labor unions breathing down his neck saying, hey, what are you going to do for us? You got the left saying, what are you going to do for us? You get the oil industry saying, please don't hurt us. Please don't look to us to solve all your problems. Jason, what do you think the governor's going to do as far as cut spending, and how's he going to juggle this? How's he going to walk this tightrope? 569-1080, by the way. We'll take calls for Jason, too, 569-1080. How's he going to manage all this?
You know, I said this before off air, and I think that there's only one way to handle this. You say, this is the dollar we spend. Let's figure this out.
So leave it up to the legislature to make
Well, I think he can provide a lot of leadership on this, right? He needs to sit down. It's the same thing that, take Adam Trombley, who I think is I thought he was an effective guy in the assembly. I hope he stays involved and runs. He worked with the Budget Commission, and he went through in the municipal budget, met with all the leaders of these different, found places where there were savings instead of cuts. So you don't have to slash and burn. But I mean, he went and said, let's do this. Let's figure this out. And that's what I think leadership's about, right? That's what we're looking for in Walker, is for him to say, we need to spend this much money. I'm going to work it on my end. You guys have to work it on your end.
So who makes the actual decision? Is it the legislature or is it the governor?
So I think the governor comes out with a budget and says, here's my budget. This is where we're capping spending.
When you say budget, you mean a number or an actual?
Yeah, I think he proposes a number, right?
Number.
And he's going to have to propose a budget. He's using Parnell's as a basis.
Right.
He drops the budget on the legislature, and they get to tinker with it a little bit.
He's letting them come out first, by the way, and obviously he hasn't been in office all that long.
Yeah.
Right.
And the price of oil hasn't been down all that long.
And of course, Walker does in the very end have a line item veto.
Yeah.
Which he can slash and burn as much as of that budget he wants.
See, there's a number of things I think we need to do, and if we want to take, we've got callers coming in.
Go ahead.
So think about this. We did this in Arkansas, and I think it's a fantastic thing, right? So we got what's called a whistleblower reward. It's not a very good name, but let's say Glen is a state bureaucrat who works in Medicaid.
Can you imagine Glen, a state bureaucrat?
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, and let's say Glen knows about 50 cases or something where that result in, and this is a real reason what happened, $33 million of waste and fraud was happening in Medicaid. So what we did is we created, 1, protections for whistleblowers, and 2, a reward for 10% of the value of the savings that they produced put into their retirement.
Why
account.
not?
Right. So
That's
they
a 90% gain.
Exactly, right? This is waste we've just cut. They get, and you put it in the retirement fund. We thought about initially doing it as cash, did it in retirement because you don't want to lose good bureaucrats, honest bureaucrats, right? So you stick it in the retirement account. But
what a great idea.
Think about that, right? Like you've rewarded cutters at every level of state
government.
government.
Dubé would be a millionaire by now when he was working for the state because he was always finding ways.
That's what I'm telling you. Like, think about that. Producing savings produces a bump in your paycheck.
569-1080. Jason Klein is our guest. He is a political consultant. Let's go to Daniel. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good, very good.
This is Daniel Ham?
Yes, good morning.
Hey,
Morning, Glenn.
Alaska Republican Assembly. You went to the Education Summit. Is it a symposium or a summit, and what's the difference?
Well, it's a symposium, kind of like a summit. Representative Laura Reinbold of Eagle River organized this really neat symposium on Common Core. Basically, it's a two-day event from 5 to 9 at the BP Energy Center. And the goal is to...
It was last night and tonight.
Last night and tonight. I went to the event last night, which was outstanding. And for those of you who are interested, it's 5 to 9 at the BP Energy Center on Northern Lights and the old Seward Highway.
Dan, can I ask a question before you get started? And that is, what's the greatest amount of change we can make in Common Core? You know, if you could write the script for this is how this was going to play out, what would be in the script so that we know why we need to know this information?
Well, Common Core, the end goal is to federalize education. It's to standardize it. And it originally began to raise education standards to an international level. What's happened with the central planning process is it's lowered standards. So the end goal is to eliminate these national standards because they're too low and they're written by academics, not teachers.
Can we get rid of them? Can we delay them? Can we ignore them? I mean, or did that not come out? Are they going to talk about what to do about it today?
I think today we'll talk more of the strategy, what to do despite the inaction of them.
Okay.
I don't know. No, it'll take strong political will to get rid of these standards.
But do you get the sense that the people want these? I mean, who the heck? How do they get a majority of people? Or is this just Barack Obama and the central planners? You know, the left.
Well, the mechanics of Common Core are interesting. You can't, by federal statute, you cannot directly write federal standards, and they got around the whole process by using the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to fund it to some $250 million.
Cha-ching.
They used several regional organizations like the National Governors Association to basically unite states and get them to adopt homogenized standards across all 50 states.
I heard a lot of the states are dropping out, by the way, now. Not a lot, but a few.
They're trying, and Alaska needs to take a legislative approach. We've already passed a bill that won't give money towards Common Core, but we've already adopted Common Core standards. Now, to get the funding comes privately from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It also comes from the federal stimulus bill. There's some $4.3 billion appropriated.
Begish's dividends continue. We just keep reaping the benefits of having elected that guy.
Yes, and anyway, this to get the money, we had to adopt these Common Core standards. We had to adopt testing of our kids. Basically, all our kids will be data tracked from pre-kindergarten to graduation of the workforce.
I just love the idea of the government data tracking everyone. That's just fantastic.
Where's Walker on Common Core, Daniel?
Oh, when I spoke with Walker a couple months ago on the campaign trail, he was against it. He was totally against it. Now, the problem, my biggest issue with Common Core, other than the standards being lower than they are currently, is the data tracking. Our poor kids are from kindergarten through college or the workforce are going to be data tracked, not only their test scores, but their behavioral issues.
Their behavioral issues.
Their health issues.
So there's going to be a file on them as they go from school to school?
Yes.
It's like that Seinfeld where Elaine kept going, her medical charts kept following her.
Yeah, there's the suggested database that the states, and these databases are going to be compatible.
Oh man,
amongst the states.
They would have let me in most schools if they had kept track of mine.
But some of the things they're going to track are stuff like peer rating data, obviously your social security number, baptism certificate data, which tracks your religion.
Oh my goodness.
Health data, and other questions they can ask and put in a database and use your imagination what they could track.
Wow.
So this data is tagged to your kids, and it becomes a lifelong data record they can't shake that follows them their entire life. And there's a very minimum privacy protections attached to this data because education providers, the people that write textbooks want access to this data. So there's very little privacy protections for this data. Basically, your whole life's going to be data tracked.
Hey, Dan, I'm going to add into this too, Daniel. So I work in politics. We build voter databases, right? And it helps us target messaging. We're really excited if we get like 30 or 35 data points on a person. This database that the state's putting together, 400 data points.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's the architecture that Alaska used. It was funded by a previous federal bill. It goes all the way back to the stimulus years. But it's called a P20 or PW-20. It's got a number associated with it, or an alphanumeric associated with it. But it basically, they use the PFD database for the architecture. So imagine all the information that PFD's database has gone in, which is every permanent Alaskan. And they use that as a base, and they're using that to build the student database up from that. So that's
well, Daniel, why? What's the why here? Why do they want to have such an extensive data about?
Well, now from an educator perspective, if you take politics out of this and you think about it, and you can implement a preschool program or a different lunch program or a different education or different curricula, and you can track how that affects student development from kindergarten all the way through college. You can say, well, this kid went through a preschool Head Start program and subsequently was 20% more likely to graduate college. So it would track educational activities all the way through the life cycle, which from an educator's perspective, they can salivate over that because they've got hard data. They can compare all 50 states with different educational techniques. The downside of that is it puts your whole life open to the public. Governments can data track people for their entire lives. Employers can do that. It's really scary, this Orwellian ability with big data now.
Well, it's pretty. So tonight at 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Between 5 and 9 o'clock at the BP Energy Center. And I really want to talk about Stanford Professor James Milgram, if you got time after the break.
No, just we don't have time. So, but I'm actually hoping to have him on if we can. But if not, then maybe we'll have Laura call in and give us an update on what he had to say.
Call in tomorrow and give us more of an update, and you can bring it up then. How's that?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. Coming up next, Cara Moriarty, Oil and Gas Association, 729. Cara Moriarty, Oil and Gas Association, 729.
$1.12 a share in the quarter, topping the estimate of $1.09. Revenue came in at $26.87 billion, just missing expectations. And Enbridge, the Canadian company responsible for a 2010 oil spill in
downtown Anchorage during a vandalism spree December 2nd.
pioneer gratitude for the sacrifices they make for each of us every day, which allows each of us the freedom to celebrate
5 FM and 1020 AM, the Valley's only rush hour news and political forum. Are you ready to rumble? Tune in to the Tom Anderson Show.
KOAN and online at 1080KOAN.com.
7:36 on a Wednesday, 10th of December. Welcome, Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel Show on KOAN KVNT. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Jason Klein is here in the studio with us, helping us co-host today. And we're happy to welcome our very good friend, Kara Moriarty, who is the president, yes?
Yes.
Of the Oil and Gas Association. I never know, you guys call yourselves executive directors or president or CEO. You're president.
Yes, my title's president and CEO.
If I had a fancy job like yours, I would demand president. And I would require that everyone in my workplace either called me Mr. or Madam President. Do you do that? Do you tell your coworkers, say,
this is one reason why Dan is not going to be really good at the head of any organization? I'm just giving people short.
Do you say to Sarah, Sarah, it's Madam President?
Yeah, I will try that later today, and I'll let you know how that goes.
I want a video, by the way, of her eye roll, because that would be really classic.
You know, I had lunch with Sarah
last
time I was in town, and I'm going to tell her when I see her this time. You refer to your boss now as Madam President.
I'll tell you how well that'll go over. Not so well.
If I worked for you, I would call you Madam President.
Okay, I'll remember that when you apply.
And I'd take a bullet for you too.
Okay.
Make sure that no terrorists
Excellent.
welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever asked you this question. How many? I've interviewed you a dozen times, maybe.
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah.
Why do so many Alaskans hate the oil industry?
I don't know that they hate the oil industry.
Oh, sure they do.
I don't know that they hate. I mean,
Madam President.
Well, let's let her use her words, though. I mean, what? Give us the spectrum of how you think people view the oil industry.
I think that it's a love-hate relationship in some ways.
Okay.
Where they recognize that the oil industry is important to the state of Alaska. I mean, anytime.
By important meaning, if it's not here, we're not here. I'll translate that for everyone else out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we do, we'll do public opinion research from time to time, and you'll say, do you believe the oil industry has been good for Alaska?
Ah.
Do you believe it's good for Alaska? 86% of Alaskans believe that. Do you believe they operate in an environmentally safe way? Overwhelming majority, 80-some%. Yep, they operate in an environmentally safe way. But when it comes down, but at the same time, it's almost like because we are the largest private sector in the state, because we pay 92% of the state's unrestricted revenue, it's almost like, but yet it's like, okay, we're this big entity in the state, so we're not loved by everyone, and we don't ask to be loved by everyone. But what we do ask is that we are, just like Governor Walker wants, and he has told us several times, he wants a business relationship with the industry and the state. That's all we ask for, because we as an industry, we want to be successful here, because when we're successful here, the state is successful.
Business partners work together, they trust each other, they have win-wins. That's
right.
The way business works.
And we don't always agree. Business partners don't always agree. I'm sure you and Dan don't agree on every issue.
Never. Not even on
math.
Not even on math.
I mean, Glen's practically a communist. I can't agree. Political people.
But at the same time, you have a common goal to have a successful radio show. And that's what we want. We have a common goal to have a successful industry, to have a successful state. And so sometimes you have different opinions of how to get there. But at the same time, you got to come back to the table time and time again to be successful.
You've read the ADN blogs, though. You've seen the people who comment on ADN blogs. There's some, and it may be right that 85% of Alaskans understand how important the industry is. Of course, I would be in that number. But I just see people on there who you guys can just do no right.
And some of those people we will never, some of those folks who comment on the blogs, they will never support the industry for one reason or the other. And we recognize that there's a percentage of Alaskans who are like that. Okay, but at the same time, we're going to continue to advocate for what we believe is best for the industry. We are going to continue to provide quality, solid, factual information about the industry and onward and upward. We're never going to have 100% support. No industry in Alaska has 100% support for their industry.
I've had people in the industry and in the business community tell me, off the record, of course, that they are terrified at the team that Mr. Walker is amassing with his administration. What do you say?
Well, I just keep going back to what the governor has told me personally, time and time again, over the last 6 to 8 weeks, before the election, after the election, at the inauguration last week, that he does not want to have an us versus them relationship between the state and the industry. He wants a business relationship, and he wants to move forward. And he's going to set the policy, and he has people in place that if he can't, to implement that policy. And so we haven't seen any policies, and not all of the appointments that he's made. I mean, they are smart people. Yeah. We've worked with them in the past. We haven't always agreed, but at the same time, I could call any of those folks and I would get a meeting with them.
Would you acknowledge, though, that the vast majority, like Robin Brenna, when I first heard the name Robin Brenna, I thought, where did I hear that name before? Robin was one of the top contributors fighting Yes on One. Mm-hmm. Robin's name was mentioned every time you heard a commercial opposing Prop 1. These people he's assembling have spent their life literally battling the oil industry. You wouldn't dispute that, would you?
Well, Robin Brenna and I spent 2.5 days together on the transition team. What was that? Now, 3 weeks ago or so. And granted, Robin and I have very different opinions on a couple of main issues. But as I said in the paper, and I wasn't lying, that we agreed on more than we disagreed with over those 2.5 days.
What were the issues, though, that you disagreed on? I mean, if you were to categorize them, because I'm desperate to understand people who I disagree with on policy issues. Most of the time, I literally cannot understand what they're talking about, having been born here, having seen the state blossom under the oil industry. I literally either don't think they know what they're talking about, or they're just making random charges. Maybe they don't even live here. Maybe they have environmentalist fears. But what is it that you guys disagreed with?
Talking to Kara Moriarty, who's president of the Oil and Gas Association.
Is that a fair question, or is that not a fair question?
Oh, sure. I mean, some of the, during the transition, some of the major disagreements came around small companies in Alaska. So.
And what do they consider a small company? Because they've always wanted more producers, but now we have Repsol and Kalis, and now Hillcorp is up on this. So we've basically got 6 producers on the North Slope, which is what they always said that they want. Small people can't actually drill, produce, and put oil in the pipeline. It takes a huge company because you got to have a big bank.
We didn't talk about what qualifies as small, because Repsol is technically the 5th largest company in the world. They're a large company worldwide. They're just small here. But it revolved around just, I think, new players besides the legacy producers. Okay. And so I'm hearing a break, and we can talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll continue with Kara Moriarty, Madam President of the Alaska Oil and Gas Association. We'll take calls too. 569-1080. 569-1080. You're listening to Fagan Biegel on KOAN, KVNT, time 7:44. Fagan Biegel on KOAN, KVNT, time 7:44.
legs and claws, all with dry ice.
Loaded it on all the search engines.
Royal Business Systems provides HP, Okidata, and Kyocera printers and MFPs, and support recognized throughout the industry as best in class. Come to Royal Business Systems for the total document solution you need to succeed in a competitive marketplace. Don't call 1-800-WHO-CARES. Call Royal Business Systems.
On with Fagan and Biegel in the morning. Give them a call, 569-1080.
7:47 here on the Fagan Biegel Show on KOA and KVNT. Also streaming live, video and audio, danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080. Our good friend Keith Montanak, he's a mechanic you can trust. Keith and his team of ASC certified mechanics are the best in the state. They know what they're doing. They are equipped with the latest technology, the latest knowledge when it comes to automobile repair. But here's the deal. Keith is trustworthy. He's an honest, trustworthy, prominent citizen. And he will treat you right. Keith Montanak, Specialty Truck and Auto. He's right across the street from the Long Branch Saloon off of Abbott. Here's his number, 349-1637. Gosh, I look like my dad there. 349-1637. I just saw this picture you posted. I'm seriously, I look like my dad, who, by the way, was old. It's like that's the first time I've looked that old, I think. Wow.
Wise.
Getting up there in years. 54.
We were talking with Kara Moriarty is in studio with us, Dan, Glen, and Jason Klein's in studio with us as well. And you were talking about areas that you and Brenna, who was a supporter of going back to ACES, getting rid of Senate Bill 21, you talked about one of the differences of opinion you had was what size of an oil company we want in the state of Alaska. Now, I'm going to pair that, if I may, with Senate Bill 21 and ACES discussion, which obviously he was a supporter of ACES. Is a primary misunderstanding or difference of opinion that exploration does not equal production? Is that a fundamental difference of opinion or understanding between you and Brenna?
Glenn, to answer that question, to be fair, we didn't talk about the differences of Senate Bill 21 during the transition team, because what we agreed on is that because the governor has said he does not plan to change Senate Bill 21, that the voters spoke, they confirmed that they want that as the tax policy back in August. So what we agreed on as far as a goal or priority is that the state should have a stable tax policy that encourages investment. So we didn't talk about the differences. So I can't speak to what Mr. Brenna's opinion is on that specific difference.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take license and I'm just going to read into that. Because, I mean, that's basically, we had a lot of small explorers because essentially most of their bills were paid by the state of Alaska to explore for oil, but they didn't become producers. The producers are massive, enormous companies like Hilcorp, Kalis, Repsol. I mean,
and I think it's important to recognize that all of those smaller companies, they wanted the tax change. They wanted Senate Bill 21. Kalis did. Repsol did. Because ACES encouraged people to come here, but then penalized them once they started getting to production. So if you're going to spend, I think Repsol has spent $500 to $600 million just exploring at this point. But if you're going to go to sanctioning a project, you've got to factor in production taxes over the life of the project. So ACES penalized you to be here. So those smaller companies, they supported Senate Bill 21, and I think that that's an important reminder for all of us.
Oil at $65 a barrel. No, you're gonna ask.
No,
a question?
I was just gonna say, I mean, and this is something, and I think I look back to Dan Fagan. We started talking about this years ago. The ACES oil tax structure. We're making more money now under the existing structure with a low price. The state of Alaska is right. They're getting more.
They want a protection at the low end.
Right. And so the biggest thing that I think people don't realize is that, as you just said, this factors of production. I heard a lot of people say, well, why don't we just give them a break if they start producing? But I think that doesn't really understand that a lot of money's put up front in exploration and things like that before they even find oil, right? And so, anyways, it's not necessarily a question other than just supporting the fact that SB 21 was necessary if we're going to have a future.
It was a policy call that the state recognized that we had declining production at record high oil prices. We had lagging, we had stagnant investment, while other places had booming investment at high oil prices. And the state recognized that that the state was vulnerable if oil prices were to drop. So now we've seen so they decided we're going to set a policy that, as you said, Glenn, protects the state at lower oil prices, allows the company to keep more at the higher oil prices so that they have more money to reinvest in Alaska.
Alaska Oil and Gas Association, of which you are the president, Karen Moriarty, is made up of basically the producers.
Yeah, our companies are those companies who are exploring, producing, refining, and transporting oil and gas in Alaska.
And how many members?
We currently have 14 members.
Has Mr. Walker spoken to you about whether he will drop his campaign promise of demanding that the state owns 52% of the gas pipeline?
No, what he has told us is that he wants to keep momentum on the gas line. And I know that he has met, and that his new team has met with the partners in the Alaska LNG project. I haven't been part of those meetings, so I can't tell you what has happened, but I do know that they have started that communication. And so I think they're in a place right now where the new team is coming up to speed with what the Alaska LNG partnership is all about. And I think, he wants to continue momentum. He's told us he does not want to go backwards.
But has he addressed specifically, publicly, at any place that you're aware of, or privately, that he was going to drop his 52% state ownership?
I think no, he hasn't said that. But what he has told us is that he is open to looking at that as an option.
As an option.
So not that it's right. I've never gotten the impression from what he has told us privately in some meetings that he's had, conversations or publicly. I've never gotten the impression that that's a mandatory thing for him. It's just he just wants to keep that as an option.
During the campaign, there was a debate that we had Friday before the election, and I specifically pinned him down on that, and he was not going to drop it. And that was the Friday before the election. You're getting a different response from him now, though. He's saying he's open to dropping it.
He just wants to keep that as an option as he's exploring.
Right, but it's not mandatory, as he said it was.
I never got the impression that it was mandatory. No, but I don't want to put.
What would it do to the negotiations, in your opinion, if that were a stipulation that he insisted on?
I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know, Dan. That's just something that they would have to work through, and I'm not sure how that would work, and I'm not sure how the state would pay for all that. I just don't know.
What's the price of oil right now, Alaska crude, roughly?
I think yesterday
somebody sent me something, 62.11 is what I just read.
We've seen no slowdown in investment, correct?
No, for 2015, even with low oil prices, the announcements and investments that have been announced for 2015, I haven't seen anybody at this point pull back on
So they're
those.
still going full speed ahead here.
Right.
Have you heard from your members any kind of talk, and I suppose this is all proprietary, and they probably wouldn't tell you anyway, but have you heard any kind of hint of what the price of oil would have to go to before the producers would say, okay, we need to slow down investment here?
No, as a trade association, it's actually illegal for us to talk about that.
Is that right?
So there's antitrust issues. So we never talk about price or speculation.
As president,
Exactly. It wouldn't even be an impeachment. It would be much faster than that.
The economist that was at
Karen Moriarty, president of Alaska Oil and Gas Association, is our guest.
The Resource Development Council just had a meeting, and they had an economist who was there for lunch, Scotiabank.
Yes.
I don't remember what the woman's name was, but she came out and said she sees low oil prices for the foreseeable future, but I read something on Drudge Report today that said, look, at oil at much lower prices, and OPEC really has difficulty staying together. Well, can you walk us through why oil would stay low for a long period of time, and what it would look like if what would cause OPEC to fray? I mean, I realize this might be just a little bit outside, but you're immersed in these kind of things. Most people don't even know what OPEC is.
Well, I would say I think the woman from Scotiabank, I think she said for the next 12 to 18 months she saw oil staying around that 65 to 75 or 70 to 75 range. And I've seen other economists, predict that. But what I can say is I think it's absolutely impossible to predict oil prices.
Yes.
You
You remember Chuck Logston?
Yes.
Long time.
Yeah.
He
Yes.
told me he was the point man for the state for many years,
Uh-huh.
and he said I have the most impossible job ever.
Right.
I'm just.
Well, basically, what they're guessing as to what Saudi Arabia is going to do. But they already kind of know what most of the rest of the countries are going to do, and it takes a long time for investment and production to sort of fall off in response to lower oil prices. So there's a stickiness to the process. But that's basically what you have to guess if you want to guess what's going to happen with oil prices.
Oh, I disagree with that vehemently. I mean, you've got conflicts in the world. You've got supply and demand. I mean, you've got environmental lawsuits. I mean, there's so many variables on what determines the price of oil. It's not one country.
Well, that's why this has happened. It's happened because Saudi Arabia said we're not shutting off our spigot anymore. We can't compete with oil shale in America. That's unstoppable.
Increase of supply in America has affected the lower prices?
Yeah, that's why they said we are going to shut prices down until we can compete with you.
So you make it sound like it's just Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
The increase in supply in America has a major role in this price, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, I think the only thing we can guarantee, and as we've seen just even here over the last 3 minutes, the only thing we can guarantee is prices are going to go up and prices are going to go down.
There you go.
And so Alaska needs to have policies that can withstand the guaranteed up and the guaranteed down.
Madam President, Karen Moriarty, real pleasure. Always fun having you in.
Thank you, Dan. I
Thanks for
appreciate
coming in with the Alaska Oil and Gas Association. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, 7:58. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, KOAN, KVNT. Stay with me. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, KOAN, KVNT. Stay with me.
experience in our lifetimes. Well, 13, 14.
Trying to take documents about U.S. military technology to China. Court papers released on Tuesday saying Yu Long was on his way to China in November when he was stopped by customs agents in his luggage. He was arrested. And the F-135 engines, which are used.
Like my dad.
For more information, visit countryfinancial.com or call 1.
Census title registration track.
All their technicians are ASE certified.
About options for coverage, how to use the online marketplace, and got assistance with.
And 696.
Now I'm signed up for the healthcare coverage I.
Hot Talk KOAN, man. You're on with Fagan and Biegel. 1080KOAN.com.
All right, here it is, 6 minutes past 8 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. Good morning to everyone out there. It's the 10th of December already. Boy, this month is just flying by. Fagan Biegel in the morning. We're on KOAN, KVNT, streaming, danfagan.us. Our good friend Jason Klein, fancy political consultant, and not only here in Alaska, but nationally. He's was part of the Koch brother networks. 8:06 at the time. Let's open up some phone lines here and get some calls in. 569-1080. 569-1080. Anything you want to talk about, let us know. Give us a call. 569-1080. That's the number to get right into the studio. Let's go to John. John, you're on.
Morning, Dan.
Morning, John.
Had a question. Glenn had mentioned earlier that most people don't understand what OPEC actually means.
Yeah.
So that's what the oil producing. What's the other two?
Exporting communities or countries, exporting countries.
Oil producing, exporting countries. So, are we ever going to get a seat at the table? I mean,
of OPEC?
You know, yeah.
Maybe if we bowed down to Allah.
Yeah.
Not all of them do. I mean, some of them are like Venezuela and.
I mean, it's a cartel. I mean, ultimately, right? I mean,
yeah.
So it's really. I thought it was Arab only.
Oh no! Anybody who exports, oil, yeah.
Well, if we're getting to the point now where we're getting to be a big dog, right? That's what I'm hearing.
We're the biggest dog.
We're the biggest dog on the block, baby.
I didn't see. That's funny because that shows my ignorance. I thought OPEC was mostly. Well, here it is now. OPEC, petroleum exporting countries.
Right.
Founded in Iraq. 5 countries: Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela.
Yeah, well, actually, Nigeria should be in there because they're an exporting country. But I thought there were 13.
I've got the list. Here.
Okay, there's 13 or so in it.
I'm with Glenn. I thought there was either 11
There's
or 13.
Yeah, there's 13. So it's Algeria, Angola, Ecuador, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and
Okay.
So the only thing we can do as a nation is to just produce and let
Gabon
those
was an
guys
original
do their
founder.
thing, right?
What's that again?
I say the only thing we can do as a nation then is just produce as much as we can produce and just push them aside. And like Glenn said earlier, they're just going to keep the spigot running.
Well, John, I'm not. And again, I didn't even know who OPEC members were, so obviously I know nothing about this. But I'm going to throw this viewpoint out anyway. It seems to me that the largest consumer of energy becoming the largest producer of energy is the reason we have lower oil prices. And I know Saudi Arabia wants to try to manipulate that, but I don't know that there's much they can do. What do you think?
What do I think about Saudi Arabia?
No, my point is the question is why is the price of oil dropped 30%? I think it's because the largest consumer of oil is now the largest producer of oil, and to me that's the reason it's dropped. And I know Saudi Arabia would like to manipulate that, but I just don't know that they can. What's your thought?
Yeah. I would assume they would like to control it. I mean, they've had the monopoly on it for decades, right?
Well, they've controlled a large share of the product of the market, but I think the more we produce, the less influence they have, right?
Well, absolutely. I totally agree with that, and that's a good position to be in. I think I'm not an economist, but
and another thing, John, what if we get a Republican president who's truly bullish on producing oil and gas, and they open up Enmore, they open up offshore off the coast of Alaska, they open up other areas in the lower 48. This thing we could double our output if we really applied ourselves on this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, with we could definitely dominate, and with fracking and the other techniques that they're sideways drilling and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just we need to get there.
And the other thing I think is important to remember that while those of us in Alaska, because of our state budget, we pull for higher oil prices, the vast majority of our fellow citizens are adversely affected by high oil prices.
Yeah, I mean, even outside. I mean, I paid it $2.30 for a gallon of gas last week. And it's fantastic.
Ooh, jealousy.
Yeah.
Airline tickets
coming down.
When you have a head of lettuce shipped from Seattle, it's going to be cheaper if the price of oil is lower. Everything.
Price of food, plastics will get cheaper.
I just can't wait till we run our economy on wind and solar power.
That's what for wind and solar to make a plastic bag that you can get your groceries in.
Oh, geez. That's funny.
Well, thanks so much for the call, John.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it. Well,
Thanks,
this is
man.
basically what happened was we've been in sort of a global recession for the last while, and a lot of new projects came on board because we had $110 a barrel oil. And they did start producing, but what is supposed to happen in a natural cycle is you have economic improvement, which soaks up the use of that oil. Well, our cars are much more efficient. Our computers are much more efficient. We are trying to be as efficient as we possibly can because it pays and it's part of our cultural values.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right? So we are changing, and then China stopped growing as dramatically as it did, so their expected increase in oil stopped coming in. India hasn't been growing as fast. So there's a lot of different things, but what they say, and this is what's reported, Saudi Arabia came to understand is, you're right, Dan, they don't actually need Anwar and offshore and whatever in Alaska. Those would be even, diamonds on the top of the crown. With shale, in and of itself, we could probably produce 15 to 20 million barrels of oil a day. By far, we would be able to export oil out of the United States of America. What Saudi Arabia realized at that point was, because what they do is they have, I think, 1.8 trillion barrels of oil in Saudi Arabia, underneath Saudi Arabia, recoverable oil.
Yeah.
So that is an amount of oil which could supply the entire world for like 50 or 60 or 70 years. It's just an unbelievable amount of oil. It's just sitting there. So they could produce 10 million barrels of oil a day if they wanted to. They were down to about 3 million barrels of oil a day, something like that. And what they realized was, if we allow this OPEC to continue to, so that we're the control on the price, trying to keep prices up so that all these other countries can do well, we're going to get crushed. We can't afford to compete with the United States shale. And so what they figured out was, okay, well, OPEC's not really working out for us. OPEC's working out well for all the rest of you because we're taking the hit for all these other countries. We're not going to do that anymore. Our goal as Saudi Arabia changed specifically for one thing, which is what they used to do, price stability. Now it is, we want our market share. We are not going to guarantee price anymore. We want our market share.
Flood the market.
Well, they didn't flood the market. They just said, we're not going to produce, if we get $110 a barrel oil at 1.5 million barrels, which will crush our economy and help all you guys out, we're not interested in that business anymore. It's not our job to help you guys run your countries in a very inefficient way. We want market share. We can produce oil at like $5, $10 a barrel. What do we care?
Yeah, they can produce significantly cheaper than we can.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So anyway, that basically, those are the economics. The slowing expansion rates, massive improvements in how much oil we produce, and them realizing we actually can't compete with the United States shale oil. We actually will get crushed, and it'll end our country.
This is all, of course, devastating news for the greenies. 569-1080, 814. 569.
Station.
You're on with Fagan and Biegel on Hot Talk KOAN and online at 1080KOAN.com.
$817, Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, right here on KOAN, KVNT. I want to tell you about a fellow by the name of Mike Daniels. He heads up a Country Financial, which here in Alaska, Country Financial, obviously you've heard of them. They're a very credible financial planning company nationally. But they have a huge presence here in the state of Alaska, 13 locations, 5 in the Valley, 5 in Anchorage. And Mike and his country representative teams are all about getting you to the place where you're well on your way to a worry-free, stress-free retirement. It's kind of a dream that we all have, that work hard, play by the rules, do our best, but then there comes a time in life where you'd like to take your spouse and travel and spend more time with the grandkids, maybe start working on a project that you've always dreamed of, go sailing, whatever it is your dream is. Well, Mike can help you make that dream come to a reality. He and his country representative team. Give the folks at Country Financial a call, set up an appointment, and you will be thrilled that you did. The number, 866-COUNTRY, 866-COUNTRY. 8:18 is the time. Our number, 569-1080. 569-1080. Jason Klein is here with us today, and he is 28 years old. You know, I think I was in kindergarten at 28. He is a already well-established, nationally known political consultant. He's worked with the Koch brothers network, and he's, of course, an Alaskan, and he currently lives in Arkansas, but he was kind enough to spend some time with us today. You know, I'm hearing a lot, Jason, today. The main message that I'm getting from the left, I don't hear environmentalism preached as much. I don't hear wealth redistribution as much. The war on women rhetoric seems to have dropped off. The demonize the rich rhetoric seems to have dropped off. What the media and the left seems to be promoting today is that we're a nation of racists.
Mm-hmm.
There's a divide here, and that working together and ending gridlock is the priority. That seems to be the focus of the left. Maybe I'm getting the wrong, maybe I'm not interpreting their message right. And anytime you try to buck the system, which of course Glen and I believe strongly that the system's broken and it needs to be bucked, that you're anti-unity, you're anti-getting along. Am I interpreting the political climate today? Because you would know as well as anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got it largely right. I think you're still seeing some, strong environmental factions. I mean, the Keystone XL pipeline is a perfect example of where sort of the radical left environmentalist crowd still has some pull, and yeah. I think they're looking at Obama's sort of lame duck 2 years as an opportunity for him to get some stuff done. I mean, he basically backdoored, cap and trade through the regulatory process, but I think you're right. I mean, the divisiveness that we've been sort of that have come at least to define the last couple months, especially. But I think what you're seeing is, and it's exciting to me, and to an extent, is that Republicans finally have an opportunity, conservatives have an opportunity to put the Democrats on defense, right? I mean, when we elected Republicans to 2010, when we took the House back, it was literally about putting the brakes on the Obama administration and their allies in Congress.
Yeah.
And so now we've got the Senate, we've got the House, we've got the opportunity for a Republican president. They're on defense. And so I think that, the need to coalesce, I think that there is sort of a need to come together, but that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice what you want. I mean, that's what it comes down to. There'd be a little sacrifice. It's a necessity of getting things done, but we've had an unbending president. I mean, what happened right after the 2014 midterms? He said, well, a lot of people still didn't vote, so guess what? I don't care.
Harry Reid, I mean, he was the most dictatorial person I think I've ever witnessed in Washington, D.C. I've never actually seen anyone basically say, we're not giving you a budget. I've got 300 or 400 bills that have actually gone through the entire process in the House of Representatives. I'm not even going to hear them.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do. It makes no difference to me that people voted for you. I'm in charge, and I'm not going to expose my president to anything. I'm not going to expose Mark Begich to anything that he doesn't want to vote for. I mean, it was actually shocking to me.
So and I think you make it the best point. Here's my observation. Had Harry Reid not manipulated the Senate and actually did the people's work of addressing the bills that were put on his desk,
totally agree.
I think Democrats would not have seen the shellacking that they did.
Wow. Absolutely right.
I mean, think about that. He spent 2 years, 2012 to 2014, maneuvering as much as he could to protect, like you said, Mark Begich, Mary Landrieu, all these people. But you know what's really funny? 30 of the 60 Democrats
half
are gone.
Landrieu was the
30th. 30 of 60 Democrats.
Both of you. I don't think most Americans understand what Glenn just described very accurately, that Reid was he was a complete disaster Senate president.
A partisan that we, such as we have never seen in the history of the country.
But I don't think
he had
most
that much
people
power.
knew that. I think what sunk to 30 is Obamacare.
Well, I agree, but my thing is, I don't think that they consciously knew, that they could cite the statistic of 300 bills sitting on the desk, but they got the sense that the Senate Democrats were playing politics and not doing the people's work.
Like our Senate Democrats here did during the Democrat-led coalition.
Yeah, but I agree, though, with
exactly the same thing.
Obamacare was, it was the gift that woke sleeping giants. I mean, it's what alighted.
I told Biegel, after he voted for it, I said, man, I don't think you're going to win the re-election. And his answer to me was, well, there's so many good things in it, like the 25-year-olds can live with their
26-year-olds.
26-year-olds, yeah.
He said that they'll get used to that. That any of the problems with it'll outweigh the
They picked 6 things out of a 2,000-page bill.
Yeah.
Kids staying on their insurance, barring pre-existing conditions, expanding access, and whatever their 6 things they always said, right? The problem is that you can achieve a lot of those things without Obamacare.
Right.
You could have passed a standalone bill that said kids can stay on their insurance till they're 26. Done. That's like 2 pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Done. Mark Begich. Like, why would you take? That's like somebody saying, "Hey, Mark, I'll put a tank of gas in your car as long as you drive it while it's on fire."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it's not worth it.
And the problem for the Democrats, in my opinion, is that they literally didn't know what was in Obamacare.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think they knew, because basically what they were saying is this is going to improve the number of people who have health insurance, not realizing that those people, once they got health insurance, couldn't pay for a doctor, which is what people are finding out now. But they essentially they trusted Obama's administration so much that they transferred most of their legislative power to the executive branch so that his czars could implement this thing however they thought it would best work out. They would feather the nest of their people. They would, do X, Y, and Z. I literally think they didn't really care what was in it, but it was a government program. Obama wanted it. And that's what they did. So they had a lot of faith.
Here's what I think happened. So, and I'll tell you the story, the most illustrative example I can give.
Talking to Jason Klein, who's our guest co-host today.
So in Arkansas, there's 3 million people that live in the state of Arkansas, and your traditional Medicaid program is 750,000 people.
Wow.
With the new expansion population, new Medicaid as a result of Obamacare, another 250,000 people. So like we've got
a third of the state.
War Memorial Stadium is where the Hogs play football in Little Rock, right? Seats 50,000 people. I tell people, if you want to understand what Obamacare did, fill that stadium 5 times, and that's the amount of people getting free health care on your dime, right? So what does that mean though? 1 in 3 people on free government health care. Democrats knew, I think they knew going in that they would lose. But they looked at the prospect of new long-term European-style socialism instituted as a result of Obamacare that creates new entitlements, that creates new constituents, and they think in 5 years, when everybody, because I'll tell you right now, we want to repeal Medicaid expansion in Arkansas. Yeah. You know what they always ask? What are you going to do with 250,000 people that now have insurance that never had it?
No, or not insurance. They actually have free health care.
Well, they actually got a silver health insurance plan on the exchange because we did an alternative model.
Oh, that's what they did.
Jason, this is interesting because we got a break coming up here, but I want to ask you this, and I'd like to have you answer it on the other side of the break. We got 65% of children right now living in households on federal aid programs. 65%.
And my kids are the other 35%.
Yeah, all 9 of them.
Is it really the goal of the Democratic Party to create a nation of dependence so they'll be politically strong? Is that really what they're about? That their own political agenda is so important to them that they're willing to create government dependence, which is, we all know, is no way to live. I'm going to ask you that when we come back.
Yeah.
And I've got a good story here, by the way, out of Fox News today. Something that a college president said that she's having to apologize for, that I think gives an indication that the racial divide, we're in the death throes of this. This is that dramatic of a story.
569-1080 is the number, 569-1080. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, we're broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. We're here every Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. You can also watch the broadcast on the interweb, as they call it, danfagan.us. Go to the website. There's a link there that will take you straight to our live broadcast. And also you can hear the show there. And we archive all the shows as we tape them and as we broadcast them live over the internet. We actually archive them too, so you can go back anytime during the day and watch the show if you'd like on danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. Where are we on a break, Brad? Am I going too early?
Yeah, a little too early.
We still got time.
Yep.
I tell you what, you know what I was just reading real quick that we can address it. It's a good 1 minute issue. John McCain talking about torture on the Senate floor yesterday.
Yes.
As a prisoner of war himself who went through torture.
Yes.
Pretty interesting.
I want to talk about that issue too, about the torture memo, was it, or what was it, torture report they're calling it?
Yeah, 500 pages. I mean, it's a huge memo, but yeah.
Begich's Senate released a report.
Begich's Senate?
Begich's, he is part of the Senate, Senate Democrats that led to the release of this report.
Yeah. Some say it's just a bash Bush thing, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk about it.
The interesting thing is Obama hasn't really come out either way for or against what's in this memo. I mean, the Drudge Report's got that headline right now. He's been very careful about what he said because I think if you remember Guantanamo Bay, he was going to close it in 100 days.
I know.
That thing's still open.
And the left, the hard left, that's their heartache with him.
It is.
It's not that he's ruined the economy.
No,
that he hasn't set enough terrorists free.
Yeah.
That's the hard left problem with that president.
I'd say, well, you know what, I'll tell you that Lindsey Graham correctly said the timing of the release, giving the growing threats we face in the Middle East, terrorism's on the rise, they're going to recruit from this thing.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be back. Jason Klein's here with us. Dan Fagan, Glen Biegel, KOAN, KVNT. If you want to weigh in, 569-1080. If you want to weigh in, 569-1080.
Brought to you by Jansen Funeral Homes.
AVN
Visit Dr. Dan Kiley at lakeotisdental.com. Call him at 562-9209.
You're on with Fagan and Biegel in the morning. Give him a call, 569-1080. KOAN.
8:35 in the morning. We're just rolling right along here on a Wednesday morning, the 10th of December. Fagan Biegel in the morning on KOAN, KVNT. Our number, 569-1080. Jason Klein, political consultant, political guru, here in the studio with us. Jason, I asked you before the break, 65% of all children now live in households with federal aid programs. Is it your opinion that the Democratic Party is intentionally trying to create more dependence because it means more political power? Or do they really care about poor people? What's going on here?
I think I always try and be careful about borderlining sort of conspiratorial concept of like the deliberate, poverty creation of America. But I do know that, to the left, and I think that you would both agree, where on the right we generally look at God as the head of society, to the left government as the head of society. I mean, that's their religion. To the progressive left, the very hard progressive left, which I think, as Glenn said, drives the agenda for the left, right? Like, there's no difference between Pat Flynn and L.V. Gray in the same way that we found there wasn't much daylight between Barack Obama and Mark Begich. So I think you have a hard progressive left who sees the state as the solution to everything, right? So regardless of how many times it fails or how many more families are created in poverty, their ideology is supported by that.
Can I amend your language a little and get your reaction? Is it that they see the state as the answer, or is it that they see themselves as the answer? And the state is just simply the vehicle in which they get to reign and rule.
Yeah, I think the state is largely a vehicle. It is about power. It always is about power, right? I mean, that's take a look at Obamacare from a very. I'm going to use this as an illustrative example. I wish I could do a visual with like a whiteboard, but here's the basic thing: is that if you broke out the 2012 electoral map, okay, break the states out and draw a line. We have a 4-panel thing, top right. Anyways, Romney on the left, Obama on the right, and you count their electoral votes, okay? And I'm going to draw a horizontal line. And the states below a certain level of Medicaid populations, like say, I think 11% of their Medicaid populations and below are below the line, and states that have 11% or higher population of Medicaid are here. So in states where you had low Medicaid populations, 180 to 210, right? Like, I think it was very, very competitive. Wow. Something very competitive in there. When you get to states with 30% or higher of their Medicaid populations, Obama got 130 electoral votes, Romney got 15.
Wow.
Okay, so when you start looking at maps like this, right, like you recognize welfare recipients vote reliably left, right? I mean, that's how it is. And as more and more you can create, and there's tons of reports out there that show Medicaid is a terrible form of health coverage, right? It's bad for people. It's not about health coverage. It's about raw political power. And the left, I think, because they see politics as sort of their religion, power is their means to get there. That's probably a little bit more esoteric than we're looking for. My simple answer is yes. I think that they look the prospect of dependency as building a constituency.
I think they see dependency as a necessary evil to their path towards perfection.
They do see it as evil, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they like to see people. They wouldn't like to be on welfare, right? And so they say, well, I would never take welfare. I'd never have an abortion. I mean, all these things they said I would never do. But when you guys talked about
I'm for fighting climate change as I jump on my private jet.
What they see is that the smartest of the left, Hollis French, good example, they go into politics because that's the greatest good that they can do. That is the greatest impact that someone on the left can have. Someone on the right, you go into business, right? You go into work for yourself, or you have a business.
With journalism.
Hire journalism.
Yeah, they see that as a definitely
same thing. So you were talking about, is it them or is it government? It's just good people, right? And good people, when we put them in government, they do good things for people who are either stupid or they have bad situations or life has been unfair to them or whatever. So they're smart people who do good things for other people, and that's basically what they see. It's a totally different.
So their heart's right.
It's a totally different kind of society.
So their heart's right.
Well, there are a lot of places where their heart's not right. In my opinion, union workers do not have a right heart. No, you cannot have 3 times the average wage and benefit plan for other people of the city of Anchorage and consider yourselves average, everyday, normal working families. No, you cannot. That's not right. That's not fair.
Because when
Okay?
Vince Beltrami, head of the AFL-CIO, criticizes people like you, he says you're working against hard-working Alaska
Working
families.
Yeah, they're actually the wealthiest among us, and they should not claim to be anything other than that. The average person who works for Chugach Electric makes something on the order of $140,000 in paying benefits. Now, that's ridiculous to say that, well, I'm just working, So there are elements where people are so entitled that something's gone wrong. Environmentalists. I keep running across environmentalists, even under the most rational situation where we obviously should give people a chance to make their case. Pebble Mine, a good example. Well, okay, we may not want to do Pebble, but at least we want to know what it is that they do want to do, what kind of technology they're going to use, and what experience we have across the world. That's where we should be. These are people who, they literally don't care about the 3,000 families who are going to have an employee that makes 100 grand. They just say no. So I'd say
because their priority is the earth.
They don't have their hearts in the right place. That they're governed by fear, and when you're governed by fear, I don't think you can actually have your heart in the right place. You can't rationally think about things. The abortion movement, obviously, that's a problem. People who want to put homosexual books in kindergarten, those are people with problems. All right, so there are a lot of elements of the left that have real problems. For your average left-winger who's out there thinking, government's not that bad of a deal, I just want you to know you are thinking of a different society as the one Dan describes, where 65% of children now live in households that get some kind of federal funding. It's just a different kind of society than the one that we should have, the one that works best. And the one that works best has people who grow up poor. No, they don't. They don't eat Big Macs every day. You know what? They don't have steak all that often. But they got good, solid families. They make good decisions because they have to.
Yeah.
That's the shocking thing. People don't have to live like you do on the left. Don't you understand that? There are different people who live in different ways. Farmers live far poorer than most of us. You know what? It's a great life. Good families, solid values. The end-all, be-all is not being comfortable, which is exactly what the values of the left are. If you're uncomfortable, there's got to be something wrong. Look, I've been uncomfortable a lot of times. I had to eat ramen for 2.5 weeks when I was in college. I ran out of money. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I had 60 cents a day to eat.
Yep, I've been there.
Yeah. So, but that's okay because you get through that, and you know what happens? I don't want to live that way.
So to Dan's point, I think, and to come back to it, I think it's very important. I really do think that their heart's in the right place. They think they're helping people, right? But the problem is,
or the average left wing,
right? And so I always go back to these examples of, like, second and third generation poverty recipients where they're largely, they learn dependency. And that's what I think that is. Learned helplessness is how Arthur Brooks from American Enterprise calls it. He says, don't call them dependents or welfare. They have a learned helplessness. And the problem is, in the founders, and this is, we're going to go to break, so I can't really get into this too much, but the founders wrote in the Declaration of Independence that we had 3 things, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like, what an interesting concept, the concept of happiness in our Declaration of Independence. Like, why did they put that? Hard work and earned success is the path to happiness. And that's why I think, to Glen's point, work and not working, it matters to our happiness, which the founders cared immensely about.
Fagan, Biegel in the morning, 8:44.
Immensely about.
Fagan, Biegel in the morning, 8:44.
Fagan and Biegel. Hot Talk KOAN, man. You're on with Fagan and Biegel. 1080KOAN.com.
.847 here on a Wednesday morning, the 10th of December. Fagan Biegel in the morning, KOAN, KVNT, our number 569-1080. 569-1080. You'll have to hit the button, Brian. I closed my computer down here. Let's go to Mark. Mark, you're on.
Hi, guys. I think this is a great discussion because it goes at the very heart of what liberalism is all about. It's about a class of folks who know better for you than you do.
Elitist.
Yeah, it's very elitist. If you read Thomas Sowell's book, who nails this very, very well, he titles it The Anointed. Because
A
they
Vision of the
believe
Anointed,
themselves the vision of the anointed. They believe themselves to be anointed by whatever, because they don't believe in God necessarily, but to order people's lives for them, because life is messy, and so they think that they can clean it up. And as Glen said, there's a utopian stream that runs through here, that somehow we can perfect people here on Earth.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Mark, because I have a friend of mine who is a leftist, absolutely committed leftist, and I had some discussions with her recently, and she didn't like Mark Begich, even though he too is a leftist, but she did not respect him because he did not have the intellectual capacity that she thought a U.S. senator should have. He did not have an education. He did not attend a university of prominence. And she actually respected Mr. Sullivan because of his intellectual background or his educational background. To her, the intellect is everything, and she's a brilliant woman herself. And what I'm learning from her is that it's really about intellectualism. This is why so many conservatives are looked down upon by the left, because they have the audacity of attending regular universities, like church. Or church.
And they have the audacity of saying that people get to run their own lives.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of the Declaration of Independence, because the founders didn't say you have the right to life, liberty, and happiness. They said you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
You may not end up being happy, but you can pursue whatever your dream is within civility and the law. And I'm not going to have to tell you what that is. I don't know what's going to float your boat, but you do, and you can pursue it, and you should pursue it. And when we put people in the dependent class or helpless class, it is a learned behavior. But as soon as you tell somebody that their labor has no value, you have devalued that person tremendously.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with our helpless class or dependent class.
Well, when you talk about the left feeling superior to us and the intellectual component, there's an old saying that I think just really nails it, and it is knowledge puffs up. Such a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And when you obtain knowledge, it brings pride and self-importance, and you begin to become an elitist, and you think you're superior to other people. When you obtain wisdom, it's a whole different ballgame. And I think if you were to characterize the left in a nutshell, they're so full of knowledge that they literally have begun to believe they're superior to the rest of us, and it gives them license to run our lives.
And that's the difference. You can be smart, and smart's not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. Wisdom is the key. But the other thing is to allow room for each individual to have their own dreams and their own vision, and to work hard to achieve that. And that's where liberals don't want. They don't want that to happen because they know what's best for them.
There's a practical application of this, and Mark Stein's actually really good on this. He talks about this phrase everybody's been throwing around called energy in the executive, right? Amassing more and more czars in the executive branch and sort of relegating Congress to sort of a ceremonial body that just kind of does things.
They weren't going to get 60 again. They did it for a very good reason.
Because here's the reason, right? Because they can appoint these intellectually smart czars who are masters of their trade. Yeah, people like Gruber or Van Jones. And Van Jones, the green job czar. That way they don't have to worry about what the people want, because they don't elect the smart people always. Right. They elect stupid people sometimes to them. So they don't want to have to deal with what the people want. They know what's best.
Yeah. Well, the old Soviet Union had czars.
Yeah. And it's and to his point, Thomas Sowell's book, The Vision of the Anointed, A vision of the anointed. He talks about how the vision of the anointed works, and it's really funny. You know, one of the examples he uses in the book is sex education in schools. It was originally sold as a concept of reducing STD rates and teen pregnancy, right? Which have all gone up since they instituted this. And so later, if what they did doesn't fit what they sold, they'll just move the goalposts.
Sure.
Well, it was actually, you know, and the people who testified in Congress about it later in interviews said, well, it was actually more about bringing the European sexual revolution to America.
Wow.
Things like that. So they'll move the goalposts. You know what I mean?
Like climate change.
Exactly. You know.
I want to say something about the helpless versus dependent, because I get a different vision in my mind of somebody who's dependent, because I have many children who are dependent, and they're not. I don't know. It's just a different versus the person who's helpless is a person who's just waiting for somebody else to come and do something. You know, if you've been convinced that you're helpless, it doesn't make any difference if you try yourself. You literally, your job at that point is, I'm just going to sit around here and wait for someone else to do whatever it is. And that was why America was so critical, because, yes, you could get charity, which is hard to take. Not many people want charity. A lot of people like to exercise their right to go and get their SNAP credit card, their supplemental nutrition assistance program, but nobody wants charity. But that was the way the country was designed. Not that we were helpless, but if you did become dependent, then you went out and you got charity, and nobody wanted that.
Check this out. Here's a good story. So most people don't know this. In 2011, when most of the presidential campaigns were fighting amongst ourselves on the right about who was the best.
Circular firing squad.
Do you know what the Obama campaign was sending their people out to do? They had iPads, and they were to go to low-income neighborhoods. And let's say Dan lives in I go up to Dan and I say, hey, how much money do you make a year? And I put that in there, and I put your zip code, and it shows me all the government programs I can sign you up for.
Oh.
His campaign was facilitating, right? So and that's what he realized, right? Like, because then later they can put them on a campaign list and say, oh, I don't know if you knew this, Mitt Romney's a rich guy who wants to take away your XYZ benefit. So you had that coming. You know, I mean, you have dependency being pursued by the left. I mean, this is why Obama refused to separate in the farm bill food stamps and the farm programs.
You know, on my old radio show, we'll take Robert's call in a second here, 569-1080. I went after ACS and GCI really hard for advertising the dollar cell phone.
Oh yeah.
And I come to find out that it is mandated in law that they do so.
Wow.
That it is written in the statute that you, as a telecommunications company, must spend a certain percentage of your budget advertising the dependency dollar a month cell phone. 569-1080. There's no doubt they're recruiting.
Oh yeah.
They're recruiting. Robert.
Yeah, hey, thanks. Great points to all. I just love listening to you in the mornings.
Thank you.
This morning, you guys are talking about basically nationalizing America, taking people's rights away, and siphoning it off to central power, central planning.
Yeah, federalized decision making. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's more than federalizing it. It's nationalizing it. There's a big difference between federal and national.
What's the difference?
Federal, you have representation. National, you don't. It's more or less like.
So you're thinking of the czars are more nationalizing things.
Yeah. You guys
great point.
made a great point with the czars and relegating the Congress to ceremonial actions, which are basically destructive and non-representational. So here we have taxation without representation, and what I'd like to get back to is what we fought the Revolutionary War against, which was coercion by the central power or the king, which we've unfortunately kind of gotten back to now. So who's the people's representative? Who should we really be trying to get our representation through? And that would be our state legislatures. So my thought is, as opposed to having a ceremonial Congress and a Senate, our Congresses really can't be changed because they're still living the mandates they were given by the Constitution, except for they've abdicated the power of the purse, but that's another story. The Senate, however, is something that needs to be talked about because a senator is supposed to represent his state. And when was the last time a senator has really represented his state legislature on a daily, consistent basis or consulted the representatives of the people in the state legislature?
Great example was brought up yesterday, by the way, just right here on this program, and that was that if we don't expand Obamacare here, then they'll still take our taxes, they'll still take our kids' money, but we don't get anything back from it. So that is a perfect example of having a person, Mark Begich, who went down to Washington, D.C. He did not represent us at all. He represented Washington, D.C., centralizing power, centralizing decision-making, and taking what we have and then not giving it back to us, if you don't follow my rules.
Yes, and so now we're in the communication age, the age of technology, where we can have conference calling and virtual meetings and emails and all these things that they didn't have back in the Founders' Day. So why do we really need senators to misrepresent us today? We need somebody who can actually represent the people, represent the state. The state was supposed to be the other half of the bicameral system. We really haven't had the states represented on a daily basis consistently for the last 101 years since the 17th Amendment was passed. And so my thought was, why don't we try to just get the discussion going about having the various...
Try to repeal it? Well, you should start the discussion. Don't ask a politician to do it, because it's very toxic when a politician starts trying to get rid of that.
It's absolutely right. They're not going to cut their own career.
Hey, Robert, we really appreciate you listening. We're out of time, though. Thank you very much. Jason Klein, what a pleasure.
Always glad
Great
to be here
show.
with you
Thanks
guys.
so much.
Really appreciate you having me in.
See you tomorrow, folks. Jason Klein, what a pleasure.
Always glad
Great
to be here
show.
with you
Thanks
guys.
so much.
Really appreciate you having me in.
See you tomorrow, folks.
And that's a wrap.